Chapter 2-1, The Return of the Missingor. For anyone watching, the Rangers clearly had a contingency. If it hadn't been Li Wei who fell, but a Haradrim or some other enemy, he would have been stabbed in the back the moment he hit the ground. The assault team members, hidden in the shadows, would have sprung out and slit his throat before he could even scream. Those frontline fighters from Ithilien were dangerous as enemies and intimidating as friends. Why would the legendary Grand Lord of the North come here alone? One ranger demanded. Li Wei's sudden arrival had startled the ambusher, but Li Wei himself had been surprised by the ranger's presence. A legendary lord whose name carried weight across Middle-earth, though he called himself a lord, his authority was more like a king, had come alone to the dangerous southern front, far from his lands. Why? I had some business in Harad, Li Wei replied earnestly. Their fruit is excellent. So you went to? To restock. Alone? Yes, alone. The rangers were speechless. He'd risked himself just to fetch some exotic fruit from an enemy stronghold. If one of their own chancellors did that, it would be unbearable to watch. It was like Morgoth singing off-key in the great music, completely out of tune. Do the people in your territory know you did this? Don't worry, Li Wei said when they asked. I left a note before I left. They should find it. They were still worried, but it was not their affair to pry. A moment later, deeper inside the cave, in a more open space, Li Wei and the captain spoke alone. I suppose I should introduce myself, the captain said. Kane, captain of the Ithilien assault team, 3rd Squad. Like the name says, we're all from Ithilien. That land is no longer safe. Uruk from Mordor press in from the east, and the Haradrim harass us from the south. We can't stand against the great armies on either side, but we still have what we can do. Whenever they set foot on Ithilien soil and let their guard down, they expose their throats. This isn't Ithilien, Li Wei reminded him. This was Harland. Ithilien lay further north beyond the Anduin, the de facto southern border of Gondor. True. Kane didn't hide anything. The Haradrim have strangely stopped harassing us lately. Their forward units pulled back from the Ithilien border and retreated to their main camp. The Chancellor suspects a larger conspiracy, so he sent us across the ford to scout. That is strange, Li Wei agreed. But we've found nothing. It's been surprisingly quiet. Quiet? Li Wei almost laughed inwardly. Had he called the captain's capture, several injured team members, and one missing man peaceful? What must peaceful have been like before then? Gondor will remember your help, Kane said. After discussing the official business, he added, conversationally, what will you do next? If you're heading north, we can send escort as far as a safe spot. Li Wei smiled faintly. Escort? Don't worry. Nothing here can threaten me. Your warriors are better used where they're needed more. He walked further into the cave and saw a dozen or more wounded sitting or lying on the ground, silently tending to their injuries. The outpost mustered only 70 or 80 men in total. Nearly half were hurt. That was bad. I happen to know how to brew some potions that can heal wounds, Li Wei said. I was missing one main ingredient, which I recently found. Perhaps your men could try them. Kane considered a moment. He remembered the rumors about the legendary lord before him. He could brew miraculous potions. Trustworthy. Li Wei took an ender chest from his inventory and set out an alchemy table and nether wart. He dug a 2-meter-wide pit to create an infinite water source, tamped a few blocks of dirt into farmland, planted watermelon seeds, and used bone meal to accelerate growth. In short order, the makeshift potion brewing station and raw material plot were ready. Now, it was a matter of waiting. Luck favored them. With a soft thud, a perfectly square, large watermelon popped into existence on its stem. We're lucky, Li Wei said, tapping it. The hollow, crisp sound echoed in the cave. Kane stared, incredulous. How did that grow? He crouched and tapped the melon twice. Cracks fanned out, then stopped. Li Wei tapped again. With a clatter, the watermelon split into slices and fell to the ground. Can they keep growing like this? Kane asked. Of course, Li Wei answered. If so, the outpost would never lack watermelons. Li Wei placed a crafting table and converted gold ingots into nuggets, combined them with the watermelon slices, and crafted golden watermelons. He placed the golden slices on the alchemy table, brewed awkward potions from nether wart, and combined them into potions. One after another, bottles of healing potion appeared. Give one to each wounded man, Li Wei instructed. Kane took the bottles without hesitation. He himself was the best validation of the potion's effectiveness. The injured drank the potions. Moments later, surprised exclamations spread through the cave. It works. A man peeled off his bandages and stood, jogging a few steps as if testing himself. It's remarkable. My bone injuries, gone. My chest, healed. The recovered men moved more freely. Kane stepped forward, face breaking into a smile he couldn't hide. You didn't just save me, you saved many of my men. It's nothing, Li Wei said. He packed the alchemy table and materials back into the ender chest. Captain, a voice called from the cave entrance. 2 team members pushed aside the leaves and climbed down the rope. A gaunt, haggard soldier staggered down and rushed toward Kane, who gripped him by the shoulders. You, Kane began, voice thick. I escaped when the Haradrim weren't watching, the man panted. They tortured me, whipped me, starved me. I thought I'd die several times. But I held on, I waited and took my chance. Kane's embrace said everything. Thousands of emotions pressed into that single, welcome back. The returned man paused for a heartbeat, then returned the hug, eyes sweeping the outpost and lingering over the many faces of former comrades. Relief softened his features. Yes, he whispered, I'm back. Thanks to everyone for the continued support. P.S. I'm recovering a bit myself and will find time to increase updates soon. The War of the Ring timeline won't be dragged out indefinitely. The story is getting closer to its end. Everything that must come will come. Thank you all for reading, and may you find peace. Chapter 202, Escape. His eyes swept the cave. In the dimness, a single figure stood out with an odd magnetic clarity. He was hardly striking, dressed plainly in a tattered linen robe, half in shadow in the corner, and yet he drew attention as if by gravity. Even in a crowd, the first glance would find him, though no one could say why. The returning team member registered it immediately. This was no ordinary man. Kane introduced him. You weren't here earlier, so let me tell you, this is Li Wei. Yes, the one everyone's been talking about these last few years. Even those of us on the front lines have heard of him. You must have heard of him in Gondor too. He turned to Li Wei and added, This is Kui Te, the recruit I told you about. Li Wei straightened from what he'd been doing and came over. Is this the new recruit who was captured? The returning team member snapped a salute. Greetings, Legend of the North. Li Wei nodded, patted the young man's shoulder, then leaned in and murmured, Your captain's been terribly worried about you. He feels guilty about what happened. Kui Te froze and stared at Kane. Kane stepped forward, bowed his head a moment, then faced the returned teammate and said softly, I'm very sorry. Perhaps I was too hard on you that day. As a new recruit, your coming here already showed courage. As a captain, I should give guidance and lead by example, not only punishment. Kui Te's mouth parted. He hadn't expected the usually strict captain to humble himself. For a moment, the certainty in his heart wavered. Then he forced a reply. No, Captain, you did nothing wrong. No, Kane said quietly. It is I who must apologize. I'm glad you're back. Li Wei produced a small bottle of healing potion and handed it to Kui Te. You look battered. Drink this. I refined it myself. It helps recovery. Many on our side have been healed by it. Seeing him hesitate, Kane added, If your memory's any good, you haven't forgotten that one of his titles is Alchemist. Kui Te accepted the bottle. Thank you. He drained it in one swallow. It tasted faintly sweet, like watermelon. Where it went, the scars of Herod's torture smoothed almost instantly. His physical exhaustion poured back into him as if by miracle. Kui Te stared at Li Wei, eyes bright with excitement. If such alchemy could be harnessed by the enemy, it would change the balance of war. He would report this man the moment he returned. He could not let someone with this ability slip away unnoticed. Shortly after, night fell. The outpost quieted. Distant, unknown creatures called from beyond the rocks. No one woke that night, tormented by nightmares or stabbing pain. The potion had done its work. When the first half of the night's watch returned, someone volunteered for the next shift. Kui Te, you should rest. The returning watchman said, I'm sorry, I can't sleep. That won't do, the watchman said. The roster's set. I can't change it at the last minute. Kui Te's face fell. Do you not trust me? Do you think I can't handle it? Of course I trust you, but I can't rearrange things on the fly. Come morning, if you still can't sleep, I'll ask the captain about changing the rotation. All right, I understand. He lowered his head and stopped arguing. The watchman moved on to wake his partner and left the cave. As he turned away, Quite glanced around, then slipped forward. He drew his sword silently, reversed the blade, and struck the man behind him with the hilt. The blow was precise. The watchman collapsed, out cold. Quite eased him down, checking that no one had seen or heard, then seized the rope and began to climb up and out. When he reached the surface, a voice came from the shadows behind him. He tensed. Someone had been watching. I remember you weren't on the roster for this shift, the voice said. Quite turned. A fellow team member crouched in a hidden spot. He hadn't expected another person out this late. I couldn't sleep, so I traded with the man on duty. Is that so? What side are you watching? Quite asked, his hand already on his sword hilt beneath his dark green cloak. North, the man answered. Quite's chest eased. I'll take the south. May the white tree bless you. You too. They split, each trusting the other's back. Quite moved away, slipping into the night toward the south. He knew his comrades' habits well and used them to his advantage. He'd left the outpost long enough to be out of sight. From a tree by the lake, someone watched him go. Li Wei, hidden in the branches, followed Quite's path with a quiet gaze. That direction led toward the Harlan River ferry, didn't it? Li Wei smiled softly to himself and watched the stars through the leaves for a moment. Kane, oh Kane, your true feelings were wasted on this one. This is a traitor. He sprang down, sword in hand, ready to pursue. Before he could move, an arm blocked his path. Li Wei turned. Standing there was Kane, the assault team captain. So you knew all along, Li Wei said. I'm not an idiot, Kane replied, his eyes unreadable. Chapter 203, Assault. He should be grateful he didn't kill his former comrades, Kane said, stroking the sword at his waist. He shook his head for a moment. From the side, Li Wei added, I must remind you, he doesn't look like he's going to do anything good. That direction is the Haradrim stronghold. I know, Kane sighed. Not only do I know, I also know that direction is the stronghold of the Harlan River Basin Army commander. Don't underestimate our intelligence, Li Wei said. You know exactly what you're doing then. If we go and catch him now, the stronghold will still be usable. There's no need. Kane didn't press it. I've given him a chance. If he hasn't repented, he must pay for his choices. The Haradrim won't miss this, Li Wei countered. They'll attack before dawn. They can't assemble many troops quickly. We can ambush them on the road. I know their strength on the north bank. This team can handle it. Afterwards, I'll settle accounts with Quite, Kane said. He'll learn how big a mistake he made. Boom, the battle horn woke the Rangers. They hastily armed themselves with longbows and blades and gathered on the ground. Kane stood before them and spoke. Our stronghold has been scouted by Haradrim's spies. Men, we fight tonight. Be ready. The Haradrim will pay for their arrogance. The assault team had seen enough deaths to be calm in sudden operations. They needed only a target and to act. Scouts slipped toward the north bank of the Harlan River. The others checked equipment and made final preparations. After a short time, the scouts returned. The Haradrim camp is agitated, one reported. They're gathering at the nearest encampment on the north bank. Then the plan is clear. Kane picked the ambush site. They'll learn why we're the assault team. Count me in. Li Wei came forward, unable to resist the pull of action. Kane smiled. With Li Wei among them, the operation felt secure, mostly. On the north bank, Quite burst into the commander's tent with a breathless report. There are 85 people in the camp, he said, including an assault team captain and an outsider. Good work. The commander clapped him on the shoulder. Who is this outsider? Quite lowered his voice. A great lord from the north, ranked comparable to a king. He's famous for legendary deeds and is said to have killed a dragon. He also practices witchcraft, especially alchemy. He had a potion that healed all my wounds instantly. After drinking it, every cut and internal injury I had vanished. The commander's eyes widened. Quite's sudden recovery now made sense. Remarkable. If we could use such witchcraft, what is Gondor to us? But why would a northern monarch be here? The commander asked. He traveled south in secret, alone, Quite answered. No attendants. That makes him far more valuable than this small team. The commander's voice was hard. We can't let him escape. He waved for his deputy. Prepare 200 cavalry. Raid the assault team's stronghold. Let them taste an ambush for once. Then gather every force from both banks and encircle the great lord. Bring the mammoths if you must. Capture him alive. I want to see how capable this northern lord truly is." Orders went out. The night's quiet broke as cavalry on the north bank mounted and advanced toward the lakeside stronghold. The Haradrim rode roaring with the hope of revenge, the hunters becoming the hunted. Unbeknownst to them, the lakeside fortress was empty. The assault team had already moved forward and lay hidden along the main road in withered brush and shadow. They waited with longbows nearly as tall as a man, quivers full of long, Kiev, green-feathered arrows and swords at their hips, ready for both distance and close quarters. Li Wei knocked his arrow, but chose not to use the fire arrow enchantment. Blazing shafts would announce their position at night. Rumble. Hoofbeats grew louder. Kane stood in front, eyes fixed on the advancing line. The ground began to tremble. At Kane's raised hand, every bow drew taut. When he swept his arm forward, a blade of sound split the night. A hail of arrows tore through the brush toward the column. Screams, the cry of horses, and a cloud of choking dust rose as the first ranks went down. The ambush struck too suddenly for the rear to react. Men tumbled and horses reared. Kane signaled again. Another volley launched and cut the cavalry nearly in half. "Over there!" a voice shouted, pointing at the hidden position, but an arrow sealed his throat mid-cry and he slumped. The defenders surged from cover, swords flashing as they charged into the stunned cavalry. The Haradrim captain fell in the first volley. His deputy took command and rallied what remained, only to see something that froze him. Fire burst out of nowhere. A figure in black armor moved like a nightmare through the melee, an elven longsword gleaming as it sliced and burned through any who stood in its path. Fire, black armor, an elven blade, magic. The deputy's mouth went dry. "War! War Shadow!" he stammered. The name hit him like a blow, the shadow of war. He turned his horse and fled, abandoning the main force in panic. He had to get word to the commander. This so-called northern lord, the traitor from Gondor, was not what they expected. His horse bolted, but then stumbled. The deputy rolled to the ground and, struggling to rise, saw the large green-feathered arrows buried in the animal's vital spots. "You damned!" A hand clamped over his mouth. A cold dagger slid to his throat and then sideways. Silent, fast. No struggle, no sound. He crumpled. The last enemy fell, lifeless in the dust. Chapter 204, Enveloped by the Night. We once lived in peace. On the north bank of the Harlan River, Hared the commander gave his final speech to the assembled army. He raised his scimitar and shouted to his men. "Some of you were farmers, some were free merchants. None of you asked for this war. Then the Gondorians came. They burned our fields, raided our caravans, freed our slaves, took our property, and forced us to pick up arms against them. Those wicked Gondorians will pay. Now is the time, warriors. By blood we repay. By blood we repay." The soldiers roared, eyes blazing with hatred. The army moved out, surrounding the lakeside stronghold from all sides. It was a complete encirclement. No gaps, no escape. "Don't stop. Fall back immediately," Kane bellowed at the front. The assault team, having just pulled off a near-perfect operation, showed no sign of complacency. The captain ordered a quick withdrawal. "Something's wrong. The vanguard is bigger than I expected. Why so many?" Li Wei looked back, squinting into the dark. "Looks like about 100, he said. Kane, veteran instincts honed to a glance, shook his head. "More like 200 cavalry. If this were a head-on fight while we're unprepared, even half that would overwhelm us." The assault team wore leather armor, cloaks, and hoods for mobility and concealment. That gear served them well in ambushes and chaotic skirmishes, but in an open-front battle, there was no place to hide. It wasn't a question of who fought better. This was simply a mismatch of equipment and tactics. "If the vanguard alone is 200, Kane said, then there are more behind them. I don't think they'd send only this force," Li Wei agreed. "Harad isn't that stupid." "Cunning, not foolish," Kane amended. "He wouldn't commit everything to a frontal bait unless..." "Unless what?" Li Wei asked. Before Kane could answer, a scout came running back, breathless. "Over 1,000 Haradrim are approaching from the rear." More scouts came in at once. "An army is moving in from the east. There's a lot of movement from the west." Kane's frown deepened. "How much movement?" The ground trembled. Drums began to roll, low and rhythmic, from all directions. Shadows closed in. "Stop!" Kane shouted, and the formation froze. Figures moved into the circle. They were surrounded. Something didn't add up. Had the cavalry been a decoy? If so, why send 200 to die? If Harad expected to trap them, why not seal them while the assault team was still hiding? The plan was either reckless or deliberate, and that made Kane uneasy. Thoughts flashed through his mind until one struck cold. He turned to Li Wei, voice low. "They're coming for you." Li Wei raised an eyebrow as horns blared. Harad's forces closed the last passageway. Kane drew his longsword. "We break through to the north." Li Wei stepped forward, drawing his nemesis at the front of the formation. "Do you mind if I lead?" By protocol, a leader from another faction had no right to command the assault team, and Kane hesitated. But they were surrounded and outnumbered. There was no time for red tape. Kane nodded. An arrow suddenly hissed from behind. Its blood-stained tip struck Kane in the waist. He staggered, breath gone from his lungs. "Captain!" Two men shouted as they grabbed him. A quick check showed no fatal wound. His mobility was gone, not his life. Li Wei saw a Haradrim archer in the distance, different from the rest, who lowered a great bow and laughed as he beat a man beside him. Li Wei reached into his pouch. "Good thing there are still 2 potions left." He tossed a vial to Kane with a faint, meaningful smile. Kane caught it, pulled the arrow free, and drank the potion. "Break through with me," Li Wei called. With his hood down and longsword raised, Li Wei charged. He pushed the line hard, taking blows from spears and arrows as he crashed into their ranks. Nothing seemed to pierce his black armor. Amber runes across his body pulsed and flared with each strike. The sword he carried burned like a living ember. When he struck down, several Haradrim were lifted off their feet as if hit by a massive hammer. Men were sent flying, caught briefly in midair and then bursting into flame. The sight was so sudden and unnatural that those who saw it felt as if the thing before them was no longer human, and the blade he swung was no ordinary sword. A terrified scream tore out of one soldier, then died on his lips as he realized he could not make another sound. That single cry acted like an alarm bell. The mystery was revealed. The men nearest Li Wei gave ground as one, shoving the ranks behind them, trying to arrest the advance. Li Wei pivoted and swept his sword to the right. The soldiers there also began to fall back, panic spreading along the line. Chapter 205, Request. Few people in this world are foolish enough to swing a sword at something they don't understand. Even the bravest warriors of Gondor would break and flee at the ringwraith's cries. Even the proudest of elves would cry aloud at the sight of a Balrog. It wasn't cowardice. What crushed them was the sheer weight of the threat. The black-armored figure before them, an elven longsword in hand, carried the shadow of war with him, casting a pall over the whole battlefield. How could such a thing exist in the east? Every connection snapped taut, and a heavy stone settled over their chests. Clang. Someone dropped his weapon, fingers going numb. In seconds, the line was unraveling. When Li Wei cut through the encirclement, the assault squad surged out behind him, spirits taut as drawn bows. Yet curiously, the Haradrim didn't press the attack. Were they hesitating? Or were they insiders? Kane had his doubts, but that didn't stop him from following Li Wei's lead as they burst forward. What are those useless cowards doing? Why aren't they attacking? The enraged commander behind them snarled. He kicked the dying Quite aside, raised his sword and roared, "Pursue them! Stop them! Anyone who retreats again will be executed on the spot." The army surged. The Mumakil lumbered close behind. Once the last of the soldiers had passed, the commander turned and kicked Quite again, the blow breaking 2 ribs. Quite gasped, tears at the corners of his eyes. "I didn't mean it. I slipped," he wheezed. "Useless," the commander spat. He threw Quite down. "If you hadn't bumped me, that arrow would have found his heart. You don't understand loyalty. Someone like you will never belong to us." "The horse is ready," the deputy reported, bringing the commander's swift mount. The commander, done with the groaning man on the ground, mounted and spurred the horse. "Leave him here," the deputy suggested. "Let him rot. Let vultures peck out his eyes. Let him regret his disloyalty." The commander rode off in pursuit. The deputy cast a cold look at Quite and followed. When command of the assault team passed to Li Wei, morale rose like a tide. The old captain had been steady, but he could not match the presence of a man who seemed to have stepped out of legend. Li Wei carried an instinctive authority. His leadership was raw and direct, but it had its own beauty. Charging at the head of the wedge, he shouldered through a storm of arrows, split the Haradrim shield wall, and tore open the encirclement. Suddenly, no one cared about tactical niceties. When a leader like that could crush the enemy, micromanagement felt pointless. Charge! The Rangers flashed their longswords and fanned out beside Li Wei like wings, sticking close so as not to hamper him. Kane signaled furiously from behind, reshaping the assault formation to match Li Wei's momentum. The wedge formation, Li Wei the spearhead, drove forward. Anything in their path was shattered by Li Wei's blade. His sweeping strokes cleared wide arcs, and the men behind finished off soldiers whose morale had broken and whose arms hung uselessly. This was the first time the assault team had executed a frontal breakthrough. The leader cleaves, the men mop up. The sense of security was intoxicating. If not for the leader at the front, the squad would have been annihilated. The current improbable success rested on him alone. They broke through with little effective resistance and raced north, leaving the northern blocking force behind. But the enemy bulk remained. Thump, shouts, and the tremor of thousands of feet rose from behind. Li Wei halted and turned. A massive host extended to the horizon, hemming them in, 3 Mumakil towering with archers and javelin throwers riding their backs. With those beasts there would be no peaceful night. "Continue the withdrawal," Li Wei said to Kane. "What are you doing?" "I'm going to get reacquainted with them," Kane replied. "Too risky," Li Wei warned. "Believe me," Kane said quickly. "We may only be 80 strong, but each of us is an elite who has seen dozens of battles. By any means necessary, we'll bring you to Gondor." Li Wei smiled. "You're right. I am an adventurer." "All right," Kane exhaled like a man unburdened. "With you here, I can't let loose." Li Wei patted his shoulder. "If we waste more time, their arrows will be flying. Take your elite troops and retreat. Be vigilant. I'm only one man. Some might slip through." "I officially return command to you," Kane said, voice heavy. Kane felt the weight of it like a mountain. Not fear of death so much as fear that this legendary lord would overreach. If Li Wei fell here, the repercussions across the north of Middle-earth would be enormous. "Aye," Kane took a breath, then made his choice. "Blessings upon you." "Retreat," Li Wei signaled, and Kane led the team northward. The Haradrim pressed forward, but after a few hundred meters, they realized one figure had remained behind. Under the moon, the commander stared at the silhouette, amusement curdling to curiosity. "Run him down, but take him alive," he ordered. The earth seemed to shudder as the host closed in. Li Wei raised his sword. In the moonlight it flashed, a chill silver. An arrow hissed and struck the side of his head. He tilted his head, plucked it out without moving his stance, and looked toward its source. When the commander met that gaze, his heart lurched. "A trickster," he told himself. "Let's see how long your act holds." Then suddenly, a volley of flaming projectiles arced and burst among the front ranks. The Mumakil were startled, rearing and stumbling. The monsters halted and sidestepped. The front of the army shattered into confusion. The commander stared, bewildered. How could so many men be unable to handle a single lord? He roared to clear the ranks. Then the memory hit him like a hammer. 2 years ago, he had been a zealot for the Dark Lord, a frontline vanguard marching toward the Khanate. He'd watched a shadow of war appear near the banner of the 30,000-strong host. That shadow had leapt alone and with a single strike killed the army commander before he could cry out. Everything in its path had been annihilated. Even a Mumakil could not stop it. He had seen it with his own eyes. Thump. A Mumakil's foot came down. Li Wei's runic shield held, then shattered. The belt he wore snapped to its emergency mechanism and exploded outward in a shockwave, throwing men and splinters aside. The Mumakil, unbalanced by the blast, pitched forward. Its tower collapsed and smashed to pieces. The beast flailed, then erupted into flames. The surrounding soldiers stumbled back, pulling away like a tide retreating from a scalding shore. The commander felt his lungs tighten. The scene before him matched the memory perfectly. Fear crawled up his spine. His horse, sensing the panic, backed several steps and snorted. Obedient as ever, the soldiers cleared a path for him. Heart racing, hands trembling against the reins, The commander found words. His voice was almost drowned by his own breathing as he spoke slowly from the saddle. Can we make a truce? Chapter 206, Deterrence and Loyalty. The sun was rising slowly. The latter half of the night finally passed. Quita couldn't help but climb up to higher ground and look back toward the south, where the Harad army had been. "What's that?" he muttered. He squinted into the distance and saw the enemy had halted. A clear space had opened in the center of their formation, and two figures stood there. One was unmistakable, the infamous Harad commander who had ambushed him a few days before. The other was Li Wei. He's forced the commander to his knees, probably taking him captive so the Harad forces will retreat, Quite thought. Sure enough, within moments, the Harad lines began to break apart. They dispersed in all directions around Li Wei and fled in disorder. The mammoths turned and hurried for the river's southern bank as the army withdrew toward their homeland. "I'll do anything. Please, don't kill me," the commander cried, kneeling with his head bowed and not daring to look up. "I swear it, I will never be your enemy for the rest of my life. Not against you, your people, or anyone close to you." "Oh, so you've seen the light?" Li Wei said, curious. He used his sword to tilt the commander's chin and pressed the blade's tip to his throat, forcing him to meet his gaze. The sunlight struck Li Wei's face and flooded the commander's pupils. He couldn't blink. Li Wei's eye reflected everything plainly, even the man groveling before him. "You should understand that oaths matter," Li Wei said. "There was once an army that broke its oath to Gondor. After they died, they turned into wandering souls, trapped in a lightless ancestral hall and never at rest." "How can I be sure you won't go back on your word?" the commander stammered. "My lord," he cried, but the fear had gone from his voice now, replaced with earnestness. "You are worthy of such a pledge. I understand the cost of betraying my word." Li Wei didn't answer immediately. He only asked, "I heard you were tracking a blue-robe wizard?" "Yes, he kidnapped our Grand Court Mage. The Grand Mage is also a wizard. That's what sparked the conflict. Call off the pursuit for him. Never set foot on this land again." "My lord, I'm only a riverbank commander. Some things aren't mine to decide." The commander looked troubled, then quickly added, "But I promise that within my jurisdiction, your will be carried out." Li Wei couldn't help but smile. "Interesting. Do you still have any Gondor captives?" "No, my lord. Our only captive betrayed Gondor. This whole operation started because of him, but there's no need to worry. He's already dead." If that was true, then he'd met a fitting end. Li Wei paused a moment, then moved on. "One more question. I heard you withdrew the armies targeting Gondor 2 years ago. Why was that?" This was one of the reasons Quite had asked for Li Wei's intervention. It was also a primary objective for their reconnaissance team. The commander was momentarily speechless. "Because of you, my lord. The Dark Lord gathered most of our forces and marched east to the Khanate. The front lines couldn't be held, so we had no choice but to fall back." Li Wei sheathed his sword and waved a hand. There was nothing more to probe for now. "Go and remember your oath." "I hope you are a wise man," the commander said. "I am." The man rose quickly and ran back to rejoin his troops. After a few steps, he turned back, breathless, to add, "My name is Bashir." "It doesn't matter," Li Wei replied. Bashir's face fell, but he dared only grumble in his head. He hoped the stranger would remember the name, so he wouldn't be killed one day without being recognized. When Bashir reached his main camp, he slipped back into the same cold, brutal manner he'd always shown. Not everyone there was stupid. Many were struck by the oddity of his return. How had he survived that legendary figure? Had the commander truly escaped? "You actually got out of his sight," the deputy said pointedly as he approached. "I gave up treasures and traded the lives of prisoners to secure your return. Do you have anything to say?" Bashir's voice was frosty. "No, it was all worth it. All our treasures and prisoners are nothing compared to your life. Even our king would say it was worth it," the deputy muttered, lowering his head. Bashir narrowed his eyes. The deputy was dutiful and capable, too curious perhaps. What a shame. He mounted the horse the deputy had brought and rode out. "What a pity. We are no longer on the same side." With the Harad army withdrawn to the river's southern bank, the Harland region would likely see a period of peace. Li Wei stood where he had been, looking left and right to ensure no stragglers remained, then turned back toward their camp. How did it go? Quite asked as soon as he reached the main force. They've retreated. They probably won't be back for a long time, Li Wei replied. I also asked about the intelligence you wanted. And what did you find? Their retreat was caused by an anomaly in the east. Sauron has called his forces and is amassing a large army to march eastward. Our opposing forces on the Gondor border couldn't be held because so many were pulled away. I see, Quite said, nodding. Who is the enemy the Dark Lord wants to conquer? Whoever it is, they must be at least as formidable as Gondor to warrant gathering tens of thousands of troops. Li Wei's answer was calm and chilling. It's me. Quite was oddly unsurprised. He'd long been told to expect such things. All right, do you mind if I take this news back to Gondor? There's nothing secret about it, Li Wei said. It shouldn't be hidden. Understood. Quite hesitated a moment, then added, One more thing. Did you see any of our men? No. He was killed by the Harad commander, Quite said, voice flat. He stopped for a moment, saying nothing further. Quite returned to the unit, selected 4 men, and formed a standard 5-person ranger squad. He appointed a temporary captain, instructing him to hold and garrison the area with the rest, while he and the newly chosen squad rode back to Gondor with Li Wei. Chapter 207, White City. Cough, cough. Half a month later, on the border of Ithilien, a gaunt figure moved through the tall, choking grass. He reached out, pushed aside the stalks, and paused. A metallic tang in the air. Blood? No. Rustling sounds all around made him flatten against the ground. I swear I'm sick of this maggoty bread, a coarse voice snarled from the left. 3 Uruk, their bodies sheathed in crude dark armor, emerged from the grass, oblivious to the human hiding nearby. The gaunt man's muscles tensed. These weren't ordinary orcs, bigger and stronger, not cowed by sunlight, with a fighting prowess that nearly matched men, though still shorter than a full-grown warrior. Time to find something to eat, one of them grunted. I haven't had fresh meat in a long time. Human meat, another rasped, licking his lips. Just thinking about it makes my mouth water. His nose twitched. Wait, do you smell that? Smell what? The 2 others froze. There's something over there. The gaunt man's heart lurched. Was he spotted? He held his breath as the Uruk leader revealed a cruel smile and led the others toward a ruined cottage. Relief flooded him. They had found someone else. Clang. Wood splintered. A child's cry cut through the air. Ha! Fresh, tender human young, the Uruk crowed. They crowded into the wreckage, already quarreling over parts. I want a thigh. I'll take the heart. His skull would make a perfect cup for wine. One raised a butcher's knife. Then a dagger whistled through the air and buried in his neck. He fell without a sound. Who's there? Another snarled. Come out, scum. A third Uruk spun, but a sword flashed and a head toppled from its shoulders. The last Uruk roared and lunged. A blade struck straight into his chest, but he only smiled cruelly, reached for the hilt, and charged. The gaunt rescuer was knocked off his feet, a black pain exploding through his side. Old ribs cracked, an old injury flared. The Uruk tore the sword free and flung it aside. He raised his knife to finish the job when the frightened child nearby sprang at him, knocking him off balance. The wounded man scrambled for the discarded sword, swallowed pain, and with everything he had left, drove the blade through the Uruk. The creature slumped. Breathing hard, the man sank to the earth and rested a moment before getting to his feet. He looked down at the boy who had watched from the ruins, face pale with shock. Child, he croaked, waving. The boy hurried over, fear and gratitude warring in his eyes. Where are your family? The man asked quietly. They're all dead, killed by orcs, the boy said, voice flat. The man bowed his head for a brief private prayer. Come with me, he said. I'll take you to a safe town. You must grow up strong. The boy nodded, then asked in a small voice, Are you a ranger? A ranger. The question struck him. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. No, I'm not worthy of that name. I'm just an ordinary man. A lowly man, he muttered, with a slow steadiness that made the boy flinch. He picked up the still bloody dagger. Under the boy's horrified gaze, the man scarred his face until it was hard to tell who he had been. The dagger clattered to the ground. He patted the boy's head and said hoarsely, Remember, this land gave you life. You are a citizen of Gondor. When you grow up, be loyal. Remember the mercy we were shown here. The boy trembled and nodded. Together, the tall, scarred man and the little boy left the ruins and headed toward Gondor's interior, toward Minas Tirith, the White City. They arrived at the city gates alongside 5 discreet rangers and a single black-clad warrior whose armor was striking against the white stone. The rangers were plain, moving with the quiet confidence of men used to work in the shadows. But this was Minas Tirith, the capital of Gondor, and people noticed regardless. Crowds lined the streets. For a ranger who had spent years hiding in trees and ruins, the sudden attention felt strange. A little girl ran up and thrust a bouquet of fresh flowers into the lead ranger's hands. "Thank you," she chirped. "Thank you, child," he replied, smiling and taking the flowers. "Seeing children like you makes all of it worthwhile." She darted back to her family, cheeks flushed with pride. "You're popular," one of his companions observed. "We suffered under Mordor for too long," the ranger said softly. "Many people from Ithilien fled here. Our homes were taken, filled with Uruk. To survive, we left." The Ithilien rangers, born of that devastated land, said little as they moved through the city. The black-clad warrior walked among them. People whispered, craned their necks. "Is that him?" one murmured. "I've heard the rumors. The great lord, the guardian of the north, the scourge of evil." "He looks like the stories," another whispered. "Has he really come to Gondor?" By the time they reached a turning in the inner city, Cain and his 4 companions stopped. They bowed to the black-clad warrior and to one another. "This is as far as we go. We must report to the Chancellor," Cain told him. "If you have time later, we'll share a drink. My treat." After a brief farewell, Cain and his men climbed the inner stairs toward the white palace that crowned the city. The black-clad warrior, Li Wei, had been left to wander. With nothing pressing, he drifted through Minas Tirith's terraces and walkways, taking in the white towers and the orderly gardens. Wherever he went, eyes followed him. Rumors spread like wildfire. A lone, formidable warrior had arrived, someone who had fought dragons and slain multitudes of orcs. People wanted to see him, but few dared approach. Awe and wariness kept most at a distance. Li Wei ignored the stairs. He had grown used to them over the years. Climbing yet another flight of steps, he stepped into a large garden. Trim hedges and beds of flowers in every hue filled the space. 2 Gondor soldiers stood sentry at the entrance, white goose-feather plumes tipping their helmets. "May I come in?" Li Wei asked. "This area is restricted," one of the guards began, but the words died on his lips when he looked at Li Wei. The man before them was not someone to be ordered about. "Please be quiet," the soldier finished instead, bowing slightly. Li Wei smiled and entered. The 2 guards resumed their post at the gate as if nothing had happened, the garden's tranquility swallowing the murmur of the city beyond. Chapter 208, Turgon Hiss. Ha! Li Wei drew a long breath on a bench in the palace garden and looked up at the open sky. He felt inexplicably refreshed. The royal household of Gondor certainly knew how to live. Roses, peonies, tulips, lavender, beds of blooms clustered everywhere, and borders of flowers ran along the paths. Only now did Li Wei understand the meaning of a riot of color. He had once thought deep hues like red and purple together looked a bit crude, like some sort of floral padded jacket. Seeing these reds and violets and every other shade spread in waves before him, he realized the ancients had not lied. The massed flowers, big and small, were exquisite. Even that image of a padded jacket somehow became refined. It was not rustic, but art. Li Wei glanced left and right to confirm he was alone, then quickly pulled out bone meal and copied one of each replicable flower into his pack. What Gondor planted, Roadside Fort could plant too. A few minutes later, he walked out of the garden, satisfied. Behind him, everything looked untouched, as if no one had been there. He hadn't gone far when a squad of guards, helmets adorned with swan feathers, marched up in formation and halted before him, blocking his way. A second squad arrived behind him, sealing him in. Li Wei's heart stuttered. Had he been caught already? "I confess," he said immediately. "I took 2 flowers from the garden, but I didn't touch any original plant. Those were flowers I grew myself with bone meal." "If that's a problem, I can return them. You don't need to give me the bone meal back." The guards fell silent, puzzled by his calmness. The captain stepped forward. "If you like the flowers, we can have our gardeners send you seeds, or we can assign a gardener to accompany you." The captain hesitated, then added, "But that is not why we're here. The Chancellor requests your presence." Li Wei blinked. Did the Chancellor really want to see him for stealing a couple of flowers? Inside the palace, on the Chancellor's high chair beside the throne, an old man frowned. He looked displeased. In principle, a stranger wandering the palace and plucking things was an affront to the royal household's dignity. If Li Wei had been a mere ranger or mage, the matter could be laughed off, but the one commanding attention here was not just any lord. He carried a reputation that rivaled kings. The Chancellor wanted to see if the rumors about this foreign lord were true. At the palace gates a short time later, Li Wei and the guard captain climbed the steps and entered. In the fountain court, Li Wei paused, staring at the white tree at the center. The guards around him froze as well. The captain watched him with taut nerves, trying to divine what this legendary visitor might do. No one dared to urge him on. "What a pity," Li Wei murmured. "What?" The captain's attention snapped back. "The tree is dead." Li Wei shook his head. The white tree standing there had withered completely. If it hadn't died yet, perhaps someone could have saved it, but now it was thoroughly gone. "Never mind. Let's go." They walked on. Outside the Chancellor's chamber, the guard halted. The captain and Li Wei entered together. On the speaker's platform beneath the vacant high throne sat the Chancellor, Denethor, stern and aged. Beside him stood a middle-aged man with surprisingly dark, thick hair who bowed slightly to Li Wei. Ecthelion. The name came to Li Wei's mind, one of those old, heroic names. It was clear this family liked to name themselves after the champions of ancient legend. The son bore the vigor his father lacked. Ecthelion was surprisingly upright for a man over 60. Denethor's eyes flicked toward his son at the greeting, displeasure tightening his face. The old man gestured for Ecthelion to step back and then fixed cold, eagle-like eyes on Li Wei. "Lord from afar, do you know whom you stand before?" Li Wei couldn't help a helpless shrug. "Of course, the Chancellor of Gondor." There was a moment's silence. Ecthelion's eyelids flicked. He looked anxious, wanting to intervene, but Denethor had already told him to keep his distance. The father clearly expected the foreign lord to be humbled by titles and protocol. "Then why do you stand here with such insolence?" Denethor said flatly. "I should teach you a lesson in the most basic of etiquette. You are a lord. You should greet the person in front of you properly." Li Wei sighed. "It's neither morning nor noon nor evening. How would you have me greet you?" "Have you eaten?" No, he hadn't, but he felt full. Li Wei stepped forward. The captain tightened, ready to call in the guards. Ecthelion couldn't hold back any longer. He hurried between the two and lowered his voice to Li Wei. "Father is old and quick to anger. Please forgive him. He wasn't like this when he was young." "What are you muttering?" Denethor snapped. "Father, we should show proper respect to a legend who has aided Gondor," Ecthelion said, glancing at Li Wei. He took a step toward the Chancellor's chair and, with a look at the assembled guards, added in a small voice, "Perhaps they truly cannot stop him." About the Chancellor of Gondor. Since the king vanished and the royal line was broken, Gondor has been governed by a chancellor. Because of the nation's customs, only someone of true royal blood can be king. Others are not accepted. That is why, no matter how long a family rules as chancellor, they remain chancellors and never become kings. To bear this staff and rule the realm in the king's stead until the king returns. The oath of the ruling chancellors of Gondor. Denethor II, the 26th ruling chancellor, once asked his father Boromir when he was young, "When can a chancellor become king?" Boromir replied, "In other lands, perhaps after a few years, but in Gondor, even 10,000 years would not be enough." The Lord of the Rings. Chapter 209, The Chancellor's Family. The audience with Gondor's chancellor ended abruptly. In the end, Li Wei and Turgon achieved nothing. Only a few sharp words were exchanged before they parted on bad terms. "Treat our esteemed guest well," the chancellor had said on his way out. "We wish to be friends." Outside the palace, Ecthelion hurried to catch up with Li Wei and apologized on his father's behalf. "Please forgive my father. He's overly concerned with power and glory, but he doesn't mean to make an enemy of you." If the man had been any ordinary lord, a bow would have smoothed things over, gifts exchanged, ties strengthened, the slight forgotten. Even the issue of not obeying certain military protocols could have been shrugged off. But this was Turgon, and Li Wei was not a man to be cowed by rank. "This is the first time I've been spoken to like that," Li Wei said lightly. "The elven lords and dwarven kings are more reasonable than he is." Had Ecthelion not stepped in to ease the blow, the visit might have ended much worse. He read a meaning between Li Wei's words that the Chancellor's arrogance had missed. Li Wei did not care for prerogatives or titles. Whether faced with a Grand Chancellor or a village elder accusing him of stealing radishes, his demeanor would be the same, unperturbed, sometimes even amused. "A guard requests your presence," someone interrupted, and Ecthelion, after a brief exchange with Li Wei, "I'll come visit you again soon," followed the messenger back into the palace. By the throne, Turgon watched them and then stepped forward to his son with a grave look. "That northern lord has ill intent. Keep your distance." "I understand, father," Ecthelion replied earnestly. Then, with an attempt to change the subject, he asked, "What do you think we should give him? He and his lands seem to lack nothing. Perhaps opening a trade route?" Turgon's face fell. "Did you listen to anything I just said?" Ecthelion, for clarity, Ecthelion Su, the man being groomed to be Gondor's 25th Chancellor, had been allowed to observe and even take part in governance. His father, Turgon, the 24th Chancellor, was 90 and would not hold office much longer. It was obvious why Ecthelion was standing before the throne. He was being trained as a successor. Later, in the palace garden, Ecthelion walked with Li Wei and talked freely. The younger man, in the prime of life, was very different from his father, gentler in manner, less oppressive in bearing. "I know the weight of father's responsibilities," he said. "Since he took the office, Gondor has been mostly at peace, until a few years ago, when news came that the enemy had returned. Mordor revived. The Haradrim grew bolder, and the southern pirates rose. The peace we had was only a mask. The enemy was only gathering strength. Mordor pressed into Ithilien. The Haradrim began seeking more than simple raids, and Umbar's pirates eyed our southern coasts with hunger. They spread rumors that Gondor was doomed and promised a better life to those who joined them. It damaged our youth. Many were misled." Li Wei listened, raising an eyebrow at the last line. Even some nobles wavered. Some packed their wealth and defected. That truly alarmed father. Ecthelion smiled ruefully. Li Wei nodded. "Your burden will be no lighter than his then. I believe you can uphold Gondor's honor." In later memory, Ecthelion would be remembered as a wise and open chancellor, one who welcomed talent from far and wide to stand against Mordor. It was under his patronage that Aragorn, serving for many years as Thorongil, rose to distinction in Gondor's service. "Thank you," Ecthelion said sincerely. "Your words honor me." "Father," a youthful voice piped from the garden entrance. Both men looked up to see a boy of about 10 dash forward. He bowed quickly to his father, then hesitated before Li Wei as if unsure what to do. Ecthelion ruffled his son's hair and introduced him. "This is my son, Denethor. Denethor, greet your uncle Li Wei." "Hello," the boy said. Before he could say more, Li Wei stood and with a light-hearted smile reached as if to lift him. Two small hands pushed against Li Wei's grasp. "Uncle, don't! I'm not a baby." Li Wei laughed awkwardly and withdrew. He had missed the chance to tease. "I even carried you as a baby," but the moment passed in good humor. Both Ecthelion and Denethor were stubborn in a way that reminded Li Wei of Aragorn's own youth. Somewhere deep in the palace, old habits and old pride churned. Turgon, having sent off his less compliant son earlier, rose, took a few long breaths, and tried to still his temper. He found himself thinking of the boy he'd once guided. When had his son stopped listening to him? The borders had been restless. Local affairs had grown burdensome. He had not kept up with family life. He felt a strange softening in his chest. He ordered a guard to prepare a plate of fresh grapes, took them himself, and walked toward the garden. He liked to stroll here, Turgon thought. Denethor used to be here too. Both loved green grapes. For a rare moment, the Chancellor smiled, temporarily setting aside state concerns and even the man who had vexed him that morning. At the garden entrance, he halted. The silver plate clattered from his hands and spilled its grapes across the path. The smile froze. His son sat on a bench, laughing with Li Wei. His grandson stood respectfully before Li Wei, as if asking for counsel. The sight was enough to undo the old man's composure. "Carry on," Turgon said, voice sour. "I have urgent matters to attend to." He He swept past them and left, robe flaring, leaving only scattered grapes in his wake. Chapter 210, Second Meeting. This family of three, grandfather, father, and son, were the last three ruling chancellors. As time passed, the burden on the chancellor's shoulders only grew heavier. In the palace garden, Liwei shook his head, unsure what to say. The adolescent Denethor before him had no inkling of the crushing responsibilities he would one day bear, the regrets and separations that would break him. Still, Liwei reached out and patted the boy's head, smiling. He's a good child. Alas, Ecthelion sighed, staring at his father's back, then collected himself and continued the conversation with Liwei. I'm glad you think so. Denethor, sudden and resolute, lifted his chin. Lord Liwei. He drew the longsword from his waist, raised it with proud defiance, and declared, I challenge you. A moment later, he slid the sword back into its scabbard, his eyes moist. Liwei gave a wry, discouraging comment. If you have time, you could train at Roadside Fort. Anyone in the barracks, even a raw recruit, would teach you how to hold a sword better. Ecthelion leaned in and, with a small cough, added quietly, He's still very impressive. My lord, Liwei said gently, he's still a child. Even so, the spark of defiance had taken root. From that day, Denethor threw himself into his training with extraordinary diligence. His teachers and family watched, astonished by the boy's desperate zeal. The day passed without incident. That night, Turgon lay awake, unable to sleep until well past midnight. Near morning, Ecthelion knocked and came in carrying a plate of fruit and a bowl of hot soup the chef had prepared. Father, perhaps we should talk. Turgon's tone was flat. What is it? I must contest one thing you said earlier. Maybe you're the one whose eyes and ears are clouded. You're too caught up in distant matters to heed what people are saying here. Heh? Then tell me, what's so important about these local rumors? Ecthelion brightened at the bait. It's a long tale. It starts with the refugees from the Anduin Valley, then the Lonely Mountain. I've heard it all, Turgon interrupted. I know he's a powerful lord, and that his swordsmanship and sorcery are as effortless as breathing. Then tell me something I haven't heard. Perhaps your story will lull me to sleep. Turgon sounded tired but intrigued. Perhaps you haven't heard the rumors coming from the Far East and the South. Remember Captain Kane, the man you sent to the Ithilien Rangers? He answered the queries you put to him in the hall, but he didn't mention the whispers about the South and the Far East. It's about Liwei, Ecthelion finished for him. At dawn, Liwei rode to the royal palace again. In the great hall, he stood before Turgon on the throne. With Turgon were his son Ecthelion and young Denethor, 3 generations assembled. Apart from Denethor, both the old king and his heir looked haggard, as if sleep had eluded them. After a pause, Turgon sighed. Gondor wishes to befriend you. Liwei inclined his head slightly. Do I need to bow? Turgon said nothing at first, only looked to Ecthelion and then Denethor. Finally, he shook his head. No, the future is not mine to bind. Lord Liwei of the North, Gondor has received your aid. That is an undeniable fact. Turgon's tone was formal. Do you ask anything of us? What I seek is already here. Liwei reached into a pouch and produced a handful of flower seeds the captain of the guard had delivered the day before, shaking them so they rustled. Turgon peered at him, puzzled. Ecthelion glanced at his father. Those are flower seeds, father. The old man's expression tightened. This cannot be considered a recompense. Reluctantly, Turgon forced the words out. If there is nothing else you need, let this stand as a promise, a chancellor's promise. Gondor will not wrong anyone who has aided it. Liwei's expression changed. There is one thing I would like. He paused, then asked, I hear Gondor possesses a seeing stone? Turgon frowned. How had Liwei learned of it? Yes, there is one. I wish to borrow it. No. Turgon's refusal was immediate and stern. Ecthelion, who had been cordial throughout the meeting, matched his father's gravity. No. You must understand, Turgon said slowly, the right to use the seeing stone belongs solely to the king. We merely keep it safe. As you said, I am a chancellor of Gondor, but I do not possess the right to handle that stone, nor to give it to anyone else. Turgon's mood brightened oddly as he spoke, the irony of his own argument stinging him back like a boomerang. Besides, he went on, voice hardening, the seeing stone is dangerous. Those with too little can be reached, even controlled, by the great enemy on the other side. I have used other seeing stones before, Li Wei replied evenly. Sauron could not touch me through them. You should have seen how furious he was. Turgon tensed at the name. How can you say that name openly? He fell silent, as if bracing for some malevolent presence. Nothing came. The hall remained still, unshadowed. Turgon's shoulders relaxed fractionally. What's wrong? He asked, bewildered. Li Wei's calm reply came like a flicker of light. I underestimated you. Turgon's breathing slowed. Perhaps your strength lets you shrug off such influences, but mark my warning, that name is itself charged. To speak it draws attention from evil eyes. A careless curiosity can open the way to corruption. You may not care, nor your son, nor I, but that name must never reach the common folk. If any among the people grow curious and speak it casually, they will likely be the first to be ruined. Corruption? Li Wei frowned, considering the weight of Turgon's caution. That is certainly something to note. If corruption took root, the consequences would be dire. Li Wei habitually sought out sources of trouble and removed them, but if the source was Sauron, that course would be far more complicated. Even weakened, Sauron held Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower. Li Wei had not forgotten that Sauron was not merely a fearsome warrior, capable, as legend said, of felling 2 high kings with a single stroke, but a sorcerer as well. Wizards fighting on their own ground had a terrible advantage. Just as Li Wei could command his home terrain, Sauron at Barad-dûr would be nearly unassailable. Li Wei had failed to defeat Sauron at Dol Guldur before. He had grown stronger since. He could resist sorcery and even break the power of the Ringwraiths. But to march into Mordor and confront Sauron in his fortress would still be folly without careful planning. This matter would require time and caution. Chapter 211, Request. That's a pity. In the end, the Seeing Stone in Gondor's White City could not be used by Li Wei. It belonged only to the King of Gondor, and only a king could decide what became of it. At present, Gondor had no king. This place is closest to Mordor. From the stone you could peer straight into Mordor itself, Li Wei said quietly. Sauron has been unusually silent these last 2 years. I suspect he's plotting something wicked. You needn't worry on that score, Turgon answered. We will keep watch, and we will send word to you the moment anything happens. Very well, then. Li Wei waved and turned to leave. Ecthelion fell into step and escorted him from the royal palace all the way to the gates. Turgon watched them go with complicated feelings. Denethor, who had only stood by and listened, his face unreadable, lowered his head. It was the first time he had heard the name, Sauron, that his father and grandfather had spoken of so often. At the same time, another thought had lodged in the young man's mind. The Seeing Stone. Sauron and the Seeing Stone, 2 things that could elude even the formidable Li Wei. An unpronounceable name and unusable object. Could that really be so? A fierce desire to overcome swelled in him. Denethor straightened proudly and watched the figure at the palace gate disappear into the distance. Turgon patted his shoulder and nodded. A son of Gondor should have such pride. Gondor was still strong, and so, seemingly, was its spirit. Later, in the White City's residential quarter, Ecthelion and Li Wei walked through the streets in ordinary clothes, appearing simply like 2 passers-by. This is as far as I should go. You needn't escort me further, Li Wei said. I'm going to see a friend, then I'll be off. A friend? Ecthelion asked. Yes, you might know him. Captain Kalin of the Ithilien assault team sent south. I promised to stop by and say hello before I leave. They paused at the door of a tavern. Passers-by slowed as they passed. Anyone going in or out seemed to feel suddenly that the door itself was superfluous. The tavern owner, above all, was thrilled. The Chancellor's son and that legendary visitor together in my tavern. This deserved some advertising. I do know him, Ecthelion said with a smile. I recruited Kalin myself and placed him in command. See, he's here, Ecthelion added. When the 3 of them stepped inside, the room fell silent as if someone had pressed pause. Only the clink of a dropped fork broke the stillness. My lord, the owner began, hurrying forward. Ecthelion waved him off. We're just ordinary guests. Do as you always do. Kalin took his seat without surprise. Li Wei's meeting with the Chancellor had evidently gone well. Who would dare make things difficult for him? Simple food was soon brought. Bread, roasted meat, beer, fruit, and vegetables. With Li Wei present, titles seemed to melt away, and the meal was relaxed and unpretentious. There's a kind of magic in being with you, Ecthelion said, biting into bread and draining his beer. He wiped foam from his lip and, with a small effort for decorum, swallowed a burp. When you're here, everyone's station falls away, only we remain. We are ourselves, Li Wei agreed, and the conversation opened up. He spoke about matters back in his lands. The apprentice rangers at Roadside Fort are still awaiting my review. The road should be finished by now. The handover requires my inspection. To be honest, I doubt they'll manage the road connection well. If they do it poorly, we'll just tear it up and rebuild. It isn't that hard, he added with a casual shrug. The Sky Road in the north. Ecthelion picked up the phrase. Yes, it links east and west. You should see it sometime. Trade in the north has grown. There's plenty to interest you. That's excellent. Congratulations. Both Ecthelion and Kalen offered their good wishes, but neither could accept Li Wei's invitation. Duty bound them. One was the Chancellor's son, the other a frontline captain. Even in quieter times, Gondor's forces could not afford to be lax. Invitations were listened to, but not always accepted. You mentioned rangers, Kalen said, interested. Do you have assault teams where you are? Not in the same sense, Li Wei replied. They operate dispersed, 4 to 5 people at most in a small unit. They don't face large armies. They're not comparable in scale to yours yet. They're like the Wanderers of the North, Li Wei smiled. They hunt isolated orcs, clear out bandit strongholds, and drive off the ogres that descend from the northern moors. Ecthelion and Kalen exchanged glances. Rangers of the North, Kalen said, then amended. Or Wanderers. That sounds like Wanderers. You're right, Li Wei said. The guides training them are Wanderers. I work with them a lot. The apprentices at Roadside Fort call them their instructors. Every fledgling ranger must be baptized by battle before he can serve as a ranger in Roadside Fort. Kalen leaned forward and explained. An assault team and rangers are basically the same in makeup. An assault team is just many rangers grouped together. When rangers operate singly or in small bands, they're rangers. When they assemble for large operations, they're an assault team. It's largely a difference of name. I see, Li Wei nodded. The north must be quiet enough. Ecthelion pictured the map and could think of nothing in the north that would threaten the man before him. The Wanderers alone kept the orcs wary, and with the rangers from Li Wei's lands, the force was substantial. At least the road from the Shire to Rivendell is clean now. The orcs and wargs that once ranged in packs are gone. As they ate, Li Wei fell thoughtful. Then, looking up, he said to Ecthelion, Your father asked if there was anything I needed. Perhaps there is. What is it? Ecthelion asked, attentive. I need a piece of land, a territory. The bluntness of the request startled both men. Claiming Gondorian land outright? Not a fief. Don't misunderstand, Li Wei hurried to explain when he saw their expressions. I only want an unclaimed, empty plot where I can build a house to store some things and use as a stopping point. Gondor is no closer to Roadside Fort than Roadside Fort is to Dale, he thought. If he had to travel the whole distance back and forth each time, it would be dangerous. Better to secure a plot now and set up a waypoint, perhaps even open a portal, so the travel wouldn't be deadly. This is it. Li Wei circled a spot on the map. The three had moved to a study after their meal. The rest of the tavern wouldn't do for the conversation they were about to have. Ecthelion leaned over the table, frowning as he examined the place Li Wei had marked. It was an open area north of Osgiliath and east of the Anduin, a stretch of land between Mordor and Gondor. Kale glanced down as well. Huh? Kale said. Isn't that near Heneth-Anun? That's one of our ranger outposts, Ecthelion answered. Seeing Li Wei's puzzled look, Kale pointed to a spot beside the river on the map. There's a waterfall there that drops into the Forbidden Pool. Our outpost sits behind it. In the cave behind the waterfall. Li Wei repeated the phrase, and a new name slipped out. Water Curtain Cave. Water Curtain Cave? Kale agreed. A curtain of water hides the cave. Fair enough name. We usually call it the Window of Sunset, or the Window of the West. Because it faces west, the last light of day pours through the falls and refracts into the cave. Originally, there wasn't a waterfall covering the entrance, Kale added. Our craftsmen altered the river's channel to make it that way. Li Wei's brow lifted. Who would have thought there'd be an outpost behind a waterfall? It's hard to imagine, Ecthelion said. Now Li Wei remembered. Isn't this where Frodo, Sam, and Gollum were captured by the Rangers when they passed through Ithilien? Of course, that episode hadn't happened yet. If left to the natural course of events, it would be decades off. He tapped his circle. Don't worry, my pickaxe is precise. I won't hit your outpost. He grinned. To the left is Osgiliath, to the right is the crossroads toward Mordor, and past that Minas Morgul, he continued. It won't interfere with anyone. It was a sensible site. Close enough to Gondor's White City if business called, close enough to the crossroads and the lands of Mordor if he felt less homesick. Cale nodded in strong agreement. Ecthelion looked at the two of them discussing it with obvious enthusiasm. Are you two missing the point? What's wrong? Can't I use this place? Li Wei asked. You can, Ecthelion said slowly, but are you sure you want to choose there? Li Wei blinked. Ecthelion continued, blunt. Every day orcs and uruks move through that area in groups. Wargs are everywhere, more numerous than wild rabbits. The garrison at Osgiliath and our rangers are constantly engaged there. There are killings almost every night. You want to build a home in that place? Cale added incredulously. Ecthelion's tone hardened. It's hard even for our craftsmen to reach safely. If you insist on building, you'll need a large garrison, thousands, to defend and maintain it. No need. I'll handle it myself, Li Wei said, waving a hand. Just tell me if the place is available. Ecthelion hesitated, then muttered, Strictly speaking, since Minas Morgul and Ithilien fell one after another, that area has long ceased to be under Gondor's firm control. It's a wild land full of dispute. If you want to do something there, go ahead, he added. Really? Li Wei asked. Really, Ecthelion said. You should tell your father, Cale said. I will. He has no reason to refuse. Ecthelion stood and left, promising to be quick. He was only gone long enough for 2 cups of tea and a brief discussion. He pushed the study door open and returned. Father agreed, he announced. He said you can do whatever you please in that area, as long as you can accomplish it. Ecthelion didn't mention the additional remark his father had made. Something about there being little they could do to control that land in any case. But Li Wei didn't need the reminder. With the formalities over, Li Wei bade them farewell and left the White City without delay. He crossed the plains beyond, passed through the half-abandoned ruins of Osgiliath, nodded to the garrison as he went by, then crossed the bridge and took the road toward the crossroads and the tangled green expanse beyond. The terrain there was rough and uneven. Anything built on it would require heavy modification. But who said buildings always had to be on level ground? Aha! Fresh human meat! Came a hoarse shout that split the night. A band of uruks in jet-black armor leapt from the roadside and charged. They raised their cleavers before Li Wei could so much as draw breath. Foolish human, one snarled. Even Gondor's stinking rangers know better than to show themselves to us. What's a single man doing out in the moonlight? Li Wei turned calmly and drew his sword. The simple, precise motion stole the fight from the uruks. The first attacker, unable to check his own momentum, plowed forward as his cleaver swung. Swish, a single arc of blade, clean and final. The uruk's head fell from his shoulders and thudded on the ground. His body twitched once and collapsed. The other uruks cried out, but it wasn't a rallying shout, just a startled, meaningless yelp. They hesitated only a heartbeat, then dropped their weapons, turned and fled into the darkness. From further back came another sound. A pack of wargs had arrived, their black fur blending with the night, only their red eyes glowed. The wargs didn't begin by searching for the mortal who had felled the uruk. First, they nosed through the retreating uruks as if checking whether any meat had been left behind. They sniffed and stared, watching closely for scraps. One of the uruks paused at the edge of the road, then pointed toward the inky wilderness beyond and said, "We're full. There's meat over there. Go get it." Without another word, he hurried to rejoin his companions, urged onward by some unseen pressure. The warg leader didn't look surprised. When their masters drove them, the beasts often surged as if tireless, racing until they dropped. Today, luck was with them, or so it seemed. They turned and padded off toward the impenetrable dark where the uruk had pointed, eager to find whatever meat lay waiting. Chapter 213, Blood Sun. Their noses twitched and the wargs drooled. The direction the uruk had pointed to carried a strong scent of blood, fresh, the dead still warm. "Roar!" Just as the wargs lunged, a hideous head rolled across the ground. The pack froze, lowering their heads to inspect it. It was an Uruk's head, freshly severed. A figure stepped out of the darkness. His armor was as black as the warg's fur, but the longsword in his hand flashed with a cold blue light. Roar! The wargs answered with furious cries, but their anger was not aimed at the man. Damn the Uruk. The Uruk were stronger, smarter, and more disciplined than ordinary orcs. They could restrain their bloodlust to obey masters' commands and fought as a single, ruthless unit. If an enemy blocked their path, they killed it. If one of their own blocked them, "You stinking orc, don't block the way." As Li Wei had sent a pack of wargs to deal with the violent human at the rear, another group of orcs had been drawn by the commotion and clustered in the path. An orc squad leader stepped forward. "I smell blood. What happened here?" "The wargs are hunting." "You're too late." "So there's fresh meat?" The orc brightened. "Of course, plenty of it. I'd say it's non-stop," the leading Uruk said in a tone that promised a feast. "Looks like tonight we eat well," the orc leader shouted to his men. Just as they were about to tear into the carcasses and fight the wargs for prime picks, he hesitated, squinting at the Uruk. "Wait, why are you leaving?" "Haha, we're full. Take what's left." The Uruk captain laughed and waved his hand, leading his force away. The orc leader spat at their backs, annoyed, but thinking scraps were better than nothing. "All right, follow me." Something choked the words off. A figure lurched forward, carrying the corpse of a warg that looked freshly killed. The dead beast was thrown aside with a dull thud. The entire pack lay slaughtered. "Those bastards!" the orc chieftain screamed. His men scattered, trying to flee in all directions, but no one could outrun a man with endless stamina. When the bodies of orcs and wargs lay strewn across the ground, the Uruk lost whatever cover their allies provided and could only run. Just a little farther. Just a little. Minas Morgul rose ahead. "Faster! If we reach Minas Morgul, the Witch King will protect us." The Uruk captain urged his men on. "If we can get there, if we reach that place." They pushed toward a crossroads. Beyond it, a short walk would bring them to Minas Morgul. Once Minas Ithil, a sister city to the White City and one of Gondor's most important forts, had stood here on Mordor's border, Isildur had planted a white tree there. Later, as Sauron rose and took Mordor, Minas Ithil fell to the Ringwraiths and became a fortress of evil. The White Tree was destroyed, its seed was saved and replanted in the White City. But Gondor's power waned, and Minas Ithil was retaken by darkness. Sauron left it to the Witch King, who blighted the land with sorcery. The air turned poisonous, the earth barren, the water venomous. Minas Ithil became Minas Morgul, the Tower of Sorcery. Anywhere but for the orc, life on that ground was death by slow poison and disease. Even if Gondor mustered massive armies, they would wither under the Witch King's curses. Even Li Wei had to drink honey from time to counteract the toxins. "The crossroads are just ahead," the Uruk captain grunted, relief showing as the ruined statue of a Gondorian king came into view. "Hold on. After the crossroads, it's the Witch King's domain. He won't dare follow." "He'll protect us," one Uruk said. "Is that so?" Clang! The longsword's blade bit sparks off an Uruk's steel as Li Wei struck. Tough, but not enough. Another sweep ended the Uruk sprinting at him. He kicked another down and finished him on the ground. "Can't escape! Can't escape!" The Uruk captain could no longer stand the sight of his men cut down. He roared and tried to charge, but Li Wei parried a cleaver, grabbed the captain by the neck, and forced him to the earth. The dark face bent close. "Go tell your people this place is mine. Don't come looking for trouble if you don't want it. If I see anyone else, I'll take the time to clear your camps from north to south. Now go." Pressure eased. The Uruk captain gasped, scrambled up, and fled without daring to look back. So much slaughter tonight. A blood-red sun rose on the horizon. Blood sun. There must have been a massacre last night. Between the crossroads and Minas Morgul, in a wasteland of withered trees and yellow-gray weeds, two rangers watched each other and the ruined land with grave eyes. "Do we have any major operations in the area?" "None that I've heard." "Then where did this slaughter come from?" Heavy breathing and the clink of armor came from the roadside. The two rangers dropped into the grass, cloaks blending with the wasteland. "One Uruk, no others." They nodded and sprang. A dagger flicked free. As the Uruk passed, one ranger leaped up and pressed a blade at his throat. The Uruk froze. "Talk, what operations are you running?" Anger burned in the Uruk captain, but he dared not lash out. What could he do? Cursing the Witch King? Threatening them? That would get his throat cut without a second thought. He needed another tack. Operations? Big operation. "You stinking rangers. Don't interfere. I'm carrying a message for my lord. Delay him, and there'll be trouble." "Who is this lord?" the rangers demanded. "The one named Li Wei," the Uruk blurted. The rangers blinked, slow to take it in. "A Mordor brute trying to threaten us with the name of one of our own? Are you letting me go or not?" The Uruk was unnervingly calm. The hand at his throat had loosened, just a fraction. The two rangers exchanged a look. "How to be sure? How do we know you're not lying?" "I swear it," the Uruk said. "Your oath means nothing to us," the other said. "Whether you believe me is your problem, but are your eyes only for making you blind? Go and see for yourselves." The grip tightened suddenly as the Uruk struggled. "All the troops we sent were wiped out by that lord. He spared my life. Isn't that proof? Do you think someone with his skill would miss killing one of us?" The ranger studied the cunning creature. The Uruk's life was in his hands, yet he felt a helpless tightening in his chest. He met his companion's gaze. Both came to the same conclusion. If what the Uruk said was true, the matter outweighed the life of an orc. With a snap, the grip released. "Go, and do your duty. If we find out you lied, don't ever leave Mordor. The moment you step out will be your end." The Uruk captain drew 2 deep breaths and let a sly smile cross his face. "Ha! Glad you didn't delay my lord's business." It worked. Invoking that name had done what curses and threats could not. The Uruk ran back toward his force, secret joy burning in him. Loyalty and fear tangled in his mind, to his master, to the dark will that ruled him. A tiny crack of doubt had opened under that oppressive darkness, and though the dark rushed to seal it, the crack had appeared. Chapter 214, Internal Strife. "Remember, none of you are to go to that place." Inside an Uruk camp, a captain barked the order. A murmur rose, then a single, insolent voice challenged him. "Is that the master's command?" The speaker was no ordinary grunt. He was one of the camp's elites, calm and sharp-eyed, a veteran who, if the captain fell, might well be the next leader. "You need to obey," the captain said, leaning forward, his tone laced with authority. If he couldn't control his own men, what use was the title? The elite scoffed. "Yes, obey, if it's the master's command. You doubt me? What if it isn't?" The captain's hand shot out and gripped the other by the throat. His voice was low and dangerous. "Listen to me. What if it isn't? The master didn't order us to attack that place, did he? He also didn't order us to abandon it." The elite slapped the hand away. "So you challenge me?" The captain's eyes hardened. He could not hope to defeat that lord. No one could. But he could break this insolent mouth. "You fool. Do you know what kind of dark places I've come back from? No one trades more than one blow with him and lives, except me." The elite was unmoved. "Then prove you're not a coward who frightens everyone into submission." A fight was inevitable. Shouts went up, and the surrounding Uruks closed ranks, forming a rough ring. The captain raised his cleaver and pointed it at his challenger. "If you can't take a hit from me, tonight you'll be served up for dinner." "Same for you, scum," came the reply. They dropped the pretense and clashed. The gathered Uruks cheered and stamped. Someone struck a fallen tree with his blade in a pattern like a war drum. "Aha!" the camp bellowed in encouragement. The elite struck first, cleaver arcing. "Too slow," the captain said, and without drawing his own weapon, he deflected the blow with his arm guard. A vicious kick sent the elite sprawling. "Die!" The elite scrambled to his feet and swung again, but the captain caught his wrist and finished the exchange with a savage headbutt. The elite crumpled. The captain spread his arms, swaggering around the ring, muscles bared. He had not even used his cleaver, and already the challenger lay broken. Leadership in Mordor was earned through blood. Any captain who lacked real strength would have been torn apart by rival drains long before rising. In the field, such a captain was a small boss, hard to topple except by guile. But for the man in command now, this was routine. He remembered the one-sided slaughter he had seen earlier that had left him tired of trifles. The challenge bored him. "Time to feast, lads." He stepped on the fallen elite, raised his cleaver, and severed the head in a single brutal stroke. Blood sprayed. The camp erupted. Uruk surged forward and tore into the corpses, ripping flesh and throwing body parts like spoils. For those who defied a leader and failed, there was only one end: shredded meat. The captain laughed, a deep, triumphant sound that echoed through the tents. His cruelty and strength would be known throughout the northern and southern encampments. This was the Orkland's grim honor. Watching the scene through the vision, a bat carried to him, the Witch King in the great hall of Minas Morgul gave a slow nod. "We are short a leader," he said softly. "Let him command this band." A warg rider left Minas Morgul at once and found the captain amid the camp's frenzy. "You're fortunate," the rider told him. "The Witch King Lord wishes to see you." The captain followed eagerly to the dark hall. Strange calm settled over him as he approached that place of power. Whatever fear he had once felt of someone beyond the Black Lands seemed diminished. Kneeling before the Witch King, he swore, "I will be loyal to the master unto death." "Very good," the Witch King said. "Brutal, efficient. These were the qualities that made a leader." Looking down at the Uruk before him, the Witch King considered how these bred-for-battle Uruks differed from ordinary orcs. If an orc were sent to fetch a target, it might return with nothing but a skeleton. No treachery intended, simply their chaotic nature. Uruks, however, carried out orders without such lapses. They would not let the object of their master's desire fall by negligence. Their execution was relentless. Rising to his full gaunt height, the Witch King leaned toward the new leader. A cold whisper scraped from his throat. "Perform well, and you will gain more. Power, blood, whatever you desire is here." He motioned. "You will take command of the forces at the crossroads." The captain rose and took the appointment with fierce pride. "From today, I will command the crossroads. I am your servant." "And now, what news from the front?" the Witch King asked once he had resumed his high throne. The captain hesitated, then reported what everyone feared to say plainly. The defenders of Gondor held fast in their ruined strongholds, tight in their iron, and the rangers skulked like rats in the brush. The Orcish drives made no real progress. The defenders could not be brought down by scattered attacks alone. The campaign required time. Sauron would need to marshal greater forces before the walls could be broken. "We will wait for the master to gather his strength," the Witch King said, thinking of the road to come. "There is other news, master," the Uruk leader said, his confidence returning. He leaned forward. "Someone has claimed territory in the combat zone." Chapter 215, Scheming Hiss. When the Uruk leader finished delivering the message, a terrifying roar echoed out from the Tower of Sorcery, making the dark troops stationed there tremble. "I haven't even gone to look for him, and he dares to provoke me?" The Witch King was furious. His form vanished like a specter and reappeared a moment later with a little water bottle in hand. He thrust it at the Uruk leader. "Take this and pour the water into that man's territory. It contains a curse. I want his land to become barren and poisoned. I want him to rot in his sleep and die a painful death." The Uruk leader held the bottle with shaking hands, cold sweat beading on his brow. "Me, to scheme against that great enemy? What, you don't dare?" The Witch King glared at his newly appointed subordinate, displeased. The Uruk leader bowed his head and submitted. "I will do it, master." "Very good. This is also a test of your ability. Let me see if you are worthy of command." Whoosh. That night, huge clouds of bats wheeled over the territory. Liwei emerged from the newly dug underground chamber and glanced up. "Where did you come from, unlucky things?" He pulled out his fireworks crossbow and fired several bolts in rapid succession. The rockets exploded amid the bat swarm, dealing area damage. Many of them dropped dead on the spot. The rest scattered, but Liwei's arrows found them too, and burning carcasses tumbled to the ground. One of the falling bats landed under a tree at the edge of Liwei's territory, right where a sneaky Uruk was crouched, quietly at work. When the firelight flickered across his feet, the Uruk leader's heart froze. "It's over. Those damned bats. What are they doing here?" "Oh." As Liwei's gaze swept over him, the Uruk leader froze and dared not move. A certain chord in Liwei's mind shifted. The Uruk immediately dropped to one knee. "My lord, the message you ordered delivered has been given. No more ignorant scum will trespass on your lands." "So it was you. You did well. Li Wei walked slowly over and looked down at him. Now tell me, what made you dare meddle in my territory? If you don't explain in 3 sentences, I'll make you lose your limbs, Li Wei added, calm but deadly. It was the Witch King. He told me to bring this and pour it into your land. He handed over the bottle. Li Wei opened it and found it empty. An empty bottle? No. The Uruk's nose twitched as a rotten stench drifted up. Li Wei looked around and saw that nearby grass had already begun to yellow. In a small pit behind the kneeling Uruk, a puddle of green liquid was seeping into the soil. Li Wei took out a bucket and poured its contents over the puddle. The ugly green water vanished and was replaced by the clean water from the bucket. The corruption stopped. The Uruk stammered. This is my territory. The bucket had a peculiar property, at least in Li Wei's hands. The water he poured would replace any liquid at the target spot. It was an aggressive rule. The new water completely took the place of the old. Good thing I found it early, Li Wei said while shoveling away the tainted grass and replacing it with fresh soil in an instant. Otherwise, you really would have succeeded. The Uruk leader dared not move. Li Wei finished cleaning the last patch of corrupted earth, then squatted and studied the kneeling creature. You said the Witch King ordered this? Yes, my lord. Tell me everything you know, and I might spare your life. I've told you everything I know. Whoosh! The long sword slid free. The Uruk, facing death, hastily blurted, I can swear loyalty to you, my lord. I've been promoted to leader and command a force. I can help you. The sword's edge hovered at his throat. Li Wei's interest was piqued. It didn't make sense. The fell creatures of Mordor were not supposed to betray. From birth, they bore Sauron's mark. His spiritual control bound their loyalty absolutely. Normally, only the power of the One Ring or another of the rings could twist their minds away from Sauron. Had this Uruk actually betrayed his master? I don't care whether you pledge allegiance or not. It's useless to me, Li Wei said. Now do this. Take a message back to your master, the Witch King. Tell him I challenge him to single combat here. That coward who resorts to trickery. If he has the nerve to accept, tell him to meet me at the crossroads. I'll wait 1 day. If he doesn't show within a day, all of Middle-earth will know he's nothing but a cowardly dog who can't bark without his master's word. The Uruk leader broke into a cold sweat. Do you understand? He left with whatever mixture of fear and duty roiling inside him. Back in Minas Morgul, the Witch King's furious roar shook the garrison. He mounted his skeletal black steed and moved to ride forth, but a ringwraith suddenly appeared and barred his way. You cannot go. Are you telling me to swallow that human's provocation? The Witch King's spirit flared, rage so intense it nearly overwhelmed the ringwraith. But the ringwraith stood firm. A dark lesson from 1,000 years past hung heavy between them. Once, the Witch King had taunted Eärnur, the 33rd king of Gondor, challenging him to single combat. Unable to bear the insult, Eärnur left his crown in the royal tomb and rode alone into Minas Morgul, and never returned. Gondor's royal line was severed, and chancellors ruled in its place. Now Li Wei had flung the same boomerang back at the Witch King. The master's command, do not go, the ringwraith said. The Witch King, bound by Sauron's will, hissed, I obey the master's will. You cannot act, the ringwraith insisted again, and the repetition irritated the Witch King. You don't need to remind me, he snarled. But I will, the ringwraith replied, and turned to leave, heading for the lair's exit. The Witch King watched him go, fingering the broken sword he had never let fall, even after death, memories flickering through his mind. Then he spoke, his voice low and cutting. You'd better show real skill. He's the first human since your fall who has caused the master so much trouble. Don't pay too much attention to it, it's just a small Easter egg. Chapter 216, Sleepless Night. Sauron had forged 20 magical rings in total. 9 had been given to powerful men, kings, great warriors, famed mages, though their precise identities were lost to history. Ancient tales named 3 as Númenórean nobles, and the Witch King was said to be one of them. Another was clearly the leader of the Easterlings, Camel, the Shadow of the East. Of the Nazgûl, the only one Li Wei had never personally defeated was the Witch King. He was the last prominent face among them. It didn't much matter if the Witch King was slain and later resurrected. Who killed him was of little consequence, at most hurting pride. But where he was killed mattered, not at the gates of Gondor. A death there would have historical consequences that Gondor would remember. 4 of the Ringwraiths had known origins. The identities of the remaining 5 were a mystery, even to the elves or wizards. Leeway didn't have answers either. At the crossroads, Leeway rose and stared at the Ringwraith who walked slowly toward him. The ruined statue of the King of Gondor loomed behind them, the last sunfire making halos on the road. "Which king?" Leeway called. No, you're not him." He waited, then shouted, "I've been here almost a day. Where is your leader? He isn't at the crossroads. Where did he go?" The Ringwraith said nothing, only kept coming. From behind his dark, ethereal body, the setting light made dim halos on the road. In front of the ruined statue, the Wraith drew a broken sword from his back, a blade barely long enough to be a dagger. Leeway smirked. "You're gonna fight me with that?" Silence. The Ringwraith advanced with measured, calm steps. They usually kept their mouths shut unless to shriek and spread terror. Fallen spirits they were, still mobile, still cunning in some ways, but their selfhood was corroded. Everything they did served Sauron. Leeway unsheathed his ancient elven blade, Nemesis. He's afraid to come himself, so he sends his subordinates to die. Clever. At least it might save a bit of dignity. If it had been any nobody shouting at the gates, the Witch King would ignore him. But this was Leeway. His every move carried weight and spread fast. The Witch King would have to answer one way or another. But what did it matter? Darkness finished swallowing the sky, and the Ringwraith's form flickered. Metal rang as Leeway spun and used Nemesis to block the broken sword aimed at his throat. The longsword's swing delivered unstoppable force and sent the Ringwraith stumbling, nearly losing his grip. Leeway followed with a powerful disarm that, unfortunately, failed. "My skills have been maxed for a long time," the Ringwraith thought, a memory of tension rising inside him, like the fear a human once felt facing an enormous beast. Leeway moved forward. The Ringwraith vanished, dodging the attack, then surfaced on the crown of the ruined statue, drawing his bow with leisurely precision. 5 arrows flew in a flash, each finding Leeway's head. Boom! Leeway's runic shield flashed 5 times as it absorbed the blows, each flash shaving 2 or 3 shield points off. That volley drained almost half of his runic shield. Powerful, but it didn't break his defense. Leeway snatched his bow and loosed a flaming arrow in return. The Ringwraith barely shifted his weight, and with one swing of his broken sword, he cleaved the arrow from the air. "Interesting," Leeway said. The Ringwraith knocked another arrow. Just then, a fishing hook and bobber snagged his armor. Caught off guard, an irresistible tug yanked him off the statue. He tumbled down, while Leeway stood beneath with his sword raised. "Do you know what baseball is?" Leeway quipped as the Wraith fell. But the Wraith blinked out of sight mid-fall and reappeared behind Leeway, drawing his broken sword. Leeway parried with a backhand. The impact tremored through the Ringwraith's arm and made his grip falter. Leeway used that opening, knocking the blade aside. Metal clashed. The Wraith lunged, lightning fast, to snatch up his weapon. Leeway activated his charge skill, leaving a dust cloud and afterimages as he closed the distance. By the time the Wraith had the broken sword back in hand, Nemesis had already fallen. The ring, some power inside Nemesis, flared. The Ringwraith's speed surged, but he could only desperately block Nemesis's blow with his tiny blade. Leeway pushed, pressing the broken sword closer to the Wraith's face. The Wraith screamed, a shriek meant to spread fear, but Leeway felt no terror. The scream did something else. It rallied the Wraith's own resolve. He tightened his grip and used every ounce of effort to parry, buying a slender chance to escape. He melted from the physical and reappeared some distance away. When he looked for Leeway, the warrior had vanished as well, leaving only a scatter of purple particles. Confused, the Ringwraith searched, and then something huge and unseen seized his helmet. He struggled and could not break free. He lashed out, but his hits could not pierce the runic shield. He was dragged and slammed into the statue's base. Leeway's blade struck, but the Wraith rolled free at the last heartbeat, and the sword plunged into the stone. The blade screeched as it carved a long gash into the statue's base. The Ringwraith was forced to roll and tumble along the stone, evading the sweeping, relentless strikes that gouged the plinth. Only when the base was split open did the Wraith get a breath. He roared, and a short-handled axe hammer formed in his hands. He charged. When the hammer slammed into Li Wei's chest plate, it shoved him back a half step, even through his netherite armor. The blow carried the force of a dwarf's heavy hammer. Li Wei raised Nemesis and met the strike head-on. The knockback enchantment did its work. Thunderous clashes rolled across the crossroads, and the startled butterflies in nearby flower beds fluttered helplessly. Each swing of the axe hammer laced it with thicker evil power, each hit growing stronger. Li Wei's strikes stacked as well, his own attack power rising with every blow until, after more than a dozen impacts, his offense reached its peak. The Ringwraith, too, had filled his stores. When their weapons met again, there was a monstrous explosion of force. The axe hammer in the Wraith's hands dissipated. He was sent flying. He scrambled upright and looked up, but it was already too late. Nemesis drove through his armor and chest, and his spirit body ignited. Ah! The Wraith's scream rent the air. He grabbed the sword in his chest with both hands and tried to tear it free, but the blade would not budge. Li Wei held on. The Wraith's thin spirit bar collapsed. His arms fell. He ceased struggling, as if accepting the end. Li Wei watched the flames ripple over the Wraith's form and peered at the ring on his hand. If he wasn't mistaken, it was one of the 9 rings of men. The rings of power each carried their own magic. The 7 given to the dwarves had multiplied gold. The rings changed fate itself. Li Wei felt a sudden urge to take the ring and study it, but he pushed the thought aside. No need. No point. The wounded Ringwraith, as his spirit fled, finally spoke, the first words he had uttered to Li Wei. A powerful warrior of no renown. Too bad I couldn't use my full strength. Shadows swirled overhead, and with a violent pull, the burning spirit was dragged back to the dark tower in Mordor for resurrection. Li Wei turned and looked at the ruined black cloak reduced to ash and the empty shell of armor on the ground. Had the Wraith actually spoken? He wasn't sure. The Ringwraiths were full of surprises. No sign of this at Dol Guldur, Li Wei murmured. Who are you, really? A warrior of such power shouldn't be anonymous. He flicked his gaze over the armor and noticed a broken sword lying nearby, rusted and worn. He picked it up. Broken straight sword, attack +1. He stared at it for a moment. He'd been fighting that with such a peace. Where was the Morgul blade that Ringwraiths were supposed to wield? Li Wei sheathed the small find and turned back to his territory. He returned to the underground excavations and continued setting up facilities. No more enemies attacked that night. When dawn came, rangers stationed near the crossroads rode through Osgiliath toward the White City. Gondor was not at peace that day. News of the Ringwraith's death and the nameless man who had struck him down spread fast. That night, in the palace, Turgon woke suddenly. He sat up, staring at the canopy, then down at the floor. He couldn't sleep. He put on his coat and went out to the balcony, looking at the starry sky and sighing. News of the crossroads fight had raced through the streets and alleys of the White City. Everyone wondered when the hero who had slain the Ringwraith would return. Li Wei had avenged Gondor. Turgon rubbed his face, regret burning him. Why did I treat him like that in the palace? He muttered. He felt the long night press on him. Someone was going to have a sleepless night. Chapter 217, The Prime Minister's Invitation. Whoosh! The portal rippled with particles, and Li Wei's figure vanished from Middle-earth and reappeared in the blazing nether. Another soul-draining project, he muttered, eyeing the new nether highway. The distances between Gondor, Roadside Fort, and Rivendell were roughly equal. Building a nether highway to any one of them would take at least a month. It was far and tedious work, but worth it. Once Roadside Fort, Rivendell, and Gondor were all connected, Li Wei would be truly ubiquitous. Add a few more territories and a couple of hellgates between them, and he could reach anywhere in the western and northern reaches of Middle-earth in a single day. One day drinking with the dwarves in the Lonely Mountain, the next shopping in Gondor, morning shopping, afternoon back at Roadside Fort for dinner, and if he was restless in the middle of the night, he could even stroll to Orthanc to ask Saruman whether he was awake. The speed was absurd, faster than any high-speed train. After briefly mapping out the nether highway connections, Li Wei rubbed his head, noted the coordinates of this hellgate, and did not linger in the nether. He didn't have many materials on him, and needed to return to roadside fort before proceeding. Stepping through the gate, he came back to the underground bastion beneath Gondor. After several days of repairs, the space had grown large and practical, fully fitted with necessary facilities and even a complete agricultural circulation system. In theory, it could support long-term underground habitation, rivaling dwarven constructions. For now, this will do, he thought. There was plenty to do at the crossroads, but nothing urgent. He casually set up decorative weapon racks and armor stands and stocked them with actual gear that could be used in battle. Then he climbed the passage to the surface and felt the sunlight again. Today, the crossroads was peaceful. As the Uruk leader had said, none of the orcs and wargs under his command had come near the area since that encounter. Any unruly orcs were kept in line by the Uruk leader's fists and cleaver. Liwei's presence had driven the rest out into the wilderness on both sides, away from Gondor's capital. For now, the direct confrontations between Gondor and Mordor had eased, at least superficially, until Sauron himself issued further orders. In Minas Morgul, within the tower, the Witch King sat motionless, reviewing the scouts' reports. Something was wrong. The two who had clashed at the crossroads, one man, one ringwraith, had probably not shown their true strength. Before he became a ringwraith, that man had been far more terrifying than his recent performance suggested, almost a threat to the Dark Master himself. It was unfortunate. Becoming a ringwraith granted the power to move through shadows, unnatural longevity, dark magics, and a fear aura, but it also corroded the soul. A ringwraith's overall might increased compared to ordinary mortals, yet it was not the same as the peak strength of the person in life. The Witch King's mind lingered on that thought. He concluded quietly, he failed. Another ringwraith flickered into being in the Great Hall, taller and more muscular than most, the build of a powerful warrior in life. As expected, he said. Are you still thinking of confronting him yourself? The Witch King asked. There's no point, the new arrival replied. Are you content to do nothing? The Witch King demanded. Then you go? The tall ringwraith countered. They fell silent. We could all 9 go together. He wouldn't hold out, the Witch King suggested finally. Perhaps. The other considered it. 9 Nazgul at Mordor's doorstep, without wizards or elven interference. A cautious, coordinated strike might succeed. But the Witch King shook his head. The Master has not given such an order. Pride and caution warred in his decaying mind. Acting without command could start a chain reaction that would endanger Mordor and its allies. Better to wait, even if it meant swallowing his reluctance. The tall ringwraith said nothing more and melted back into the shadows until the Great Hall was silent again. The Witch King's crimson eyes glowed faintly beneath his hideous helm as one memory flitted across his mind, and he quickly drove it away. Glorfindel. The Witch King remembered that elf lord who had once routed him. In the year 1975 of the Third Age, during the Battle of Fornost, the Witch King and his Angmar host invaded Arnor and had humiliated Eärnor by scattering his mount. What most remembered as the Witch King's triumph missed a critical detail. Glorfindel had come with Rivendell's forces. The mere presence of that elf lord, a warrior who had returned from Valinor with strength akin to that of the greatest, had terrified the Witch King so thoroughly he fled and dared not show himself for the entire battle. Glorfindel's status in Rivendell, under Elrond's command, was unparalleled. He was a sweeping and decisive force, the sort of figure who could change the balance wherever he appeared. If Glorfindel had come to the crossroads, the Witch King shivered at the thought and banished it. Why dwell on such worst-case scenarios? The presence of one troublesome human was bad enough. If both had combined forces, what then? He told himself that Glorfindel never left Rivendell without reason, content to remain there, as if waiting for the world's end. Unlike that other wanderer, the so-called Lord of the Free Cities, who abandoned territories and popped up everywhere, impossible to pin down when you actually needed him. He was seen everywhere, but never found. Back at the crossroads, rangers kept watch along the road. As Liwei reached the surface, 2 of them leaped from the undergrowth and startled him so badly he almost drew his blade. "We have tracked your footsteps for days, but we could never find you," they blurted, both looking breathless and excited. Liwei inhaled, calming himself. These guys were scarier than ringwraiths and balrogs when they leapt out like that. Cough. You're Rangers of Gondor. What is it you need? He asked. One of the rangers, young and eager, tugged at his cloak as if to hand him a sealed summons and stepped forward, only to be clapped over the mouth by the older man, who hissed a sharp reprimand. The younger man froze. My lord, the older ranger said, lowering his hand, the Chancellor invites you to a meeting in Gondor. Chapter 218, A Token of Friendship. Although the Chancellor's invitation was important, Leeway still took a moment before leaving Gondor to sign an autograph for the young ranger. If writing my name brings any protection or luck, I'll sign until the ink runs dry, he joked. Patting the ranger on the shoulder, Leeway added, May this cloak help you stay hidden in the wild. My heartfelt thanks, the young ranger said, grinning from ear to ear. The steady older ranger who had delivered the Chancellor's message fidgeted awkwardly, rubbing his stubble. Should he ask for an autograph too? A blast from Gondor's horn cut through the hesitation. The city gates opened, and a shower of petals drifted down as residents on either side of the road waved to the black-armored warrior entering. Balconies and upper tiers overlooking the gate were packed with people. Only Li Wei, standing at the center of the crowd, looked surprised. Is today a festival? He asked the ranger beside him. It can be, the ranger replied after a moment's thought. Li Wei nodded slowly. Then I've come at a fortunate time. When you come, it's always like this, the ranger said. Li Wei glanced around, feeling countless eyes on him, their fervor nearly scorching through his netherite alloy armor. The younger ranger couldn't stand the vague conversation any longer and said plainly, It's not a festival. The people are out because of you. Word that you intend to avenge Gondor's 1,000-year-old humiliation at the hands of the Witch King has spread through Minas Tirith. A memory clicked into place for Li Wei. Right. The reason Gondor fell under Chancellor rule was that their last king had been killed by the Witch King. That king had been obsessed with martial training and left no heir. I see, Li Wei said, trying to keep his tone casual. I'm just surprised by how enthusiastic everyone is. He waved back at the crowd and pretended he had expected all this. Inside, he was taken aback. This felt like stumbling upon a random monster by the roadside and suddenly triggering a major quest. The crowd began to chant, Hail the Legend of the North! Hail Li Wei, ally of Gondor! From the fountain square, Turgon heard the cheers and rose from his seat, making his way to the highest tier of the White City to look down. Why are so many people gathered? He murmured. He didn't mind the celebrations for heroes, but this scale seemed excessive, something he'd last seen when troops returned from reclaiming a ruined stronghold. Our people need a respite, father, Ecthelion said, joining him. He stood behind his elderly father and looked down as well. With the Dark Lord's return and the unrest in the south, everyone's nerves have been frayed. These last few years, we've all feared that the long peace would shatter. Let Gondor celebrate this once, Ecthelion continued. News like this will lift the soldiers still on the front. Even the tautest bowstring cannot remain stretched forever. Turgon sighed and waved his hand. All right, you decide. I am old. My eyes are not what they once were. Some things should have been left to you long ago. He smiled wryly, then looked toward the eastern sky. If the Dark Lord had returned a few decades earlier, I would have met him on the field. Ecthelion lowered his head and fell silent. Neither he nor his father were pure Dunedain. 100 years was already near the limit, and now Turgon was over 90. The cheering drew to the stair leading to the royal hall, and Turgon and his son moved to the edge to await Li Wei. Welcome, our ally, Turgon called as Li Wei reached the summit. Li Wei blinked at the unexpected warmth. Thank you. If you ever need it, the gates of Roadside Fort will be open to you as well. They shook hands and exchanged smiles, smoothing over earlier awkwardness. Ecthelion watched from behind, a genuine smile touching his mouth. Gondor's prestige rose in that moment. The city was once more a beacon that could rally armies from nearby kingdoms if need be. Conceivably, if Li Wei chose, he could now call upon elite forces of dwarves, men, and elves and secure the support of multiple realms. Turgon looked grateful. To this day, I do not know how to repay your kindness to Gondor. He motioned to a guard, who stepped forward carrying a small box. Turgon opened it to reveal an exquisitely crafted short sword, a golden hilt inlaid with gems and a blade that flashed sharply in the sunlight. Li Wei lifted the sword and a prompt appeared in his mind. Chancellor's short sword, attack +6, attack speed +50%. He examined the hilt more closely and noticed an empty frame where a crest should be. Ecthelion stepped forward and explained quietly, "The Chancellor rules in the king's stead in the king's absence and may not use the royal crests of power. So it remains blank," Li Wei said. "And later, that blank became our family's emblem?" Ecthelion nodded. "Opposite it is the black crest of the Dark Lord, as a pledge that we stand against all that darkness represents. But we can talk of these old matters another time." Turgon interrupted gently, leaning closer to Li Wei. "I hope this gift will commemorate our friendship," he said. "That blank crest can stand for me and my house. When you display it, anyone who knows Gondor will understand its meaning. I know it may not be of great use to you, but please accept it," he added, his voice solemn and sincere. Li Wei's expression matched the gravity of the moment. "Then, on behalf of myself and the people of my territory, I accept this token of friendship from Gondor." The exchange took place beneath the dead white tree at the city's highest point, witnessed by the citizens of Minas Tirith. Applause erupted like rain. Chapter 219, The Council of Gondor. This year would be remembered in Gondor for a long time. The Haradrim driven back in the south, Mordor in retreat, the Witch King humiliated, and a century-old grievance avenged. And all of it, in one way or another, had been the work of a single man. After the festivals and gift-giving ended, people finally allowed themselves to breathe. Yet as long as the threat remained, some could never truly relax. After the celebrations, the Council of Gondor convened. The council was a gathering of the kingdom's highest officials, assembled to advise the king or the ruling chancellor. The king outranked the chancellor, and the chancellor, in turn, outranked the princes and lords who made up the rest of the assembly. This meeting, however, was different from most. Many topics centered on one person, Li Wei, the North's legend, founder and leader of the Free Cities. First and foremost, forging an alliance with Li Wei and the cities he led was beyond debate. Anyone who contested that would be courting trouble. The chancellor would be the first to have them ejected. Once that decision was settled, the council moved through routine reports, the state of Gondor's territories, the lost lands of Ithilien, and the defense of the southern coast. "The Haradrim have been quiet," a commander reported. "They've gathered on the south bank of the Harlan River, subdued, with only a few sentries left on the north bank. Their intent to attack is low. Even their usual harrying has ceased." Turgon nodded. He knew who to credit, Li Wei, the fruit wholesaler. Reports from Osgiliath say the large Uruk force near the crossroads has begun to scatter into Ithilien. Overall, the trend looks like a withdrawal toward Mordor. That, too, was Li Wei's doing, the nemesis of evil, the Builder. And news from the river mouth south of Lebanon, a pirate fleet that tried to prey on coastal fishermen, was broken up by our men. Turgon paused, then lowered his voice to ask a man beside him, "Was Li Wei involved?" "No, my lord. There are no records of his presence there," came the reply. Well done, then. Those pirates needed to learn the consequences of trespassing in Gondor's waters. Lebanon, and Pelargir in particular at the Anduin's Delta, had once been Gondor's great shipyard and main port. The 12th through 15th kings of Gondor built fleets there and ruled the seas. Those rulers became known as the Ship Kings. But subsequent kings surrendered to luxury and neglect, and the navy decayed. Gondor's decline, many said, had begun there. The pirates of Umbar had long watched Pelargir's weakening. They dared not seize it outright while defenders were strong, but they sent raiding fleets to plunder coastal villages whenever chance allowed. It was high time they felt the price. The council continued through its agenda. When the formal reports concluded and every matter had been addressed, a hush settled over the hall. No one rose to leave. Turgon sat quietly, his eyes drifting to the great doorway. Why hadn't the meeting been dismissed? On everyone's mind was the same question. "My lord, is there anything else?" asked the commander just returned from the front, the practical voice of the room. "Don't be hasty, Sengel." Turgon finally spoke. With the main business finished, he relaxed a little and said, "I am waiting for someone I think you all ought to meet." You said a few days ago you'd like to meet him, Sengel, Turgon added, smiling. Could it be? Sengel looked up, hope warming his expression. At Turgon's words, the others exchanged glances until one man said, Yes, it's Li Wei. Everyone understood then. Lately, he had been the talk of the city. Every scrap of news about him in demand, even the little tavern he had visited being crowded daily. Nobles went there out of curiosity, just to see what made him different. If the council could meet him through official channels, all the better. Did he forget we had a meeting? Sengel asked. Turgon choked on the question, collected himself, and answered, No, he hasn't been found. He is in the city, but he's managed to evade my men all day. He seems a master of hiding. But do not worry. Ecthelion went to seek him before the council began. I believe he will bring him here soon. If you have urgent business, you may leave. I will not keep you, Turgon added, but almost no one moved. They were curious to see the man, and Ecthelion's reputation convinced them he would succeed. Even before officially holding power, Ecthelion carried weight. His word commanded obedience. The sun slid a little lower, and at last there was movement at the hall's entrance. Ecthelion strode in, breathless, wiping sweat from his brow and smoothing his robes. Slow down, a voice called from behind. Li Wei came in next, wiping his hands and still chewing an apple turnover a Gondor baker had given him. Every eye in the hall swung to him, and his mouth for a moment forgot how to close. He swallowed quickly and avoided an embarrassing cough. It seems our guest has a good appetite, Turgon said, unusually light-hearted. Li Wei finished the pastry, smiled at the old man, and shrugged. All right, but I don't yet know why you've asked me here. Ecthelion, who had run so fast he'd had no time for formalities, answered, I wanted you to meet these people. They are important to Gondor. Turgon rose and came forward to greet him in person. Li Wei inclined his head and followed, allowing Turgon to introduce him around. One by one, the kingdom's high officials, regional governors, commanders, lords, and envoys stepped forward to offer greeting. When Li Wei reached an envoy from Dol Amroth, he paused. The man's features were not purely Númenorian. Your bloodline is unusual, Li Wei observed. Yes, my lord, the envoy replied. I come of the house of Dol Amroth. Many of our kin carry elven blood. You noticed at first meeting? The envoy said, surprised and pleased. I've many Dunedain and elven friends, Li Wei said. Spending time with them makes certain differences easy to spot. The envoy bowed with evident satisfaction. Li Wei glanced briefly at the man's conspicuously high 25 health points and smiled without further comment. Chapter 220, The Heir to the Throne of Rohan. This is Sengel. After the meeting officially ended, Turgon arranged to see Li Wei alone and took the chance to reintroduce one of the commanders from the council. Sengel, the name was vaguely familiar. He is not a man of Gondor, Turgon said, but he is respected by all men of Gondor. Oh? Li Wei peered at the general before him with interest. He did remember the name. Sengel was the only son of Fengel, the current king of Rohan, in other words, the father of Theoden, though by the dates Theoden had not yet been born. I've heard of you. You and your father don't get along, do you? Li Wei brought up the subject deliberately. The smile on Sengel's face froze. Turgon and Ecthelion, standing behind him, also went still. It was not a pleasant topic. Sengel did not dodge it. No, he admitted. If anyone asks, I'll say this. I don't have a single good feeling for him. To most people, the family disgrace might be something to hide, but in front of this legendary figure, it no longer mattered. No one could put on airs around him. There was no shame in speaking plainly. That man, the one I'm bound by blood to call father, he's ruined Rohan. He cares only for himself. He eats and drinks and ignores the state and his family. When he does deign to speak, it's to order his men to extort the folk to feed his endless greed. As he spoke, Sengel's voice grew heavy with old frustration. He's surrounded by sycophants who flatter him and indulge him. Not a single marshal of Rohan or anyone who truly loves the country is on good terms with him. My 2 elder sisters hate him. I cannot tolerate what he's done to Rohan, but I have no right to interfere, Sengel said, frowning. Even if I wanted to act to recover what's been lost, he would stop me and put me under guard. So I thought it better to leave than to waste my years there. Sengel looked away. If he rules Rohan one more day, I won't return. In truth, I don't want to go back. Gondor suits me better. Bound by etiquette and blood, he could not openly overthrow his father. Doing so would bring disaster. But if he could not resist, he could at least leave. This will all end one day, he added. I believe both Rohan and Gondor will grow stronger in time. Li Wei shook his hand. Is that a wizard's prophecy? Ecthelion joked. Turgon and Sengel exchanged knowing smiles. Everyone here knew one of Li Wei's nicknames, the Block Wizard. It had been the first epithet to spread of him in these lands. Let's just say it is, Li Wei replied lightly. He looked at the two men facing him, Ecthelion and Sengel. One would become Gondor's chancellor, the other would become Rohan's king. Later histories would call the former a wise chancellor, adept in governance, and the latter a wise king. When his father died, the people of Rohan would bid Sengel return and take the throne. Though reluctant, he would return, and in his decades of rule, Rohan would prosper. In the years to come, Gondor and Rohan would each be led by capable rulers, and the two greatest human realms among the free peoples would steadily grow in strength against Mordor. When their reigns ended, the War of the Ring would follow, the final chapter of the Third Age, perhaps the final chapter of the whole adventure. Decades. It was only a few decades. Sitting in the hall with just the four of them, Li Wei lingered in that thought. 7 or 8 years had passed since the Lonely Mountain expedition, truly a blink of an eye. Time had left no visible mark on him yet. He felt much the same as when he had first arrived here, his mind still full of adventure and building. But like an elf, his sense of time had dulled. Without noticing, so many years slid by. I'll leave you young people to the rest of your time, Turgon said with a smile. I won't disturb you. Young people, Li Wei mused. From Turgon's perspective, at 90 years, both Ecthelion, already over 60, and Sengel, nearing 40, were still the youth in their prime. As for Li Wei himself, he was younger still, though no one would believe him. Counting only from his arrival in this world, he would be only 8 years old. All right, what shall the three of us young people do? Eat, Li Wei asked. I agree. It's nearly noon, Ecthelion said. Me too, Sengel added. Then let me cook, Li Wei said, waving his hand and assuming the role of chef. He chuckled at the thought. The first time he'd met Bilbo, he'd asked if Bilbo was a royal cook. Now he was actually cooking in Gondor's palace. You're going to cook yourself? Ecthelion's eyes lit up with curiosity about Li Wei's recipes and skills. Sengel stood. I should tell my family I won't be back for lunch. Why not bring them here? I don't mind making more dishes, Li Wei offered. If that's the case, I will bring out my prized wines, Ecthelion said. Dorwinian and Roadside Fort vintages are rare. Roadside Fort wine? Li Wei turned, surprised. Noth, you mean the vintage from your territory? Yes, Ecthelion replied. It should make you feel at home. Ecthelion paused, then looked at Li Wei with surprise. You didn't know? The caravan from Roadside Fort arrived here only yesterday. Ah? Li Wei blinked. How did they get here?